right, looks like we are live. Welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. My name is Donnie, and I am your host and moderator for this much anticipated debate between Matt Slick and Jake, the Muslim metaphysician. Some would say this is the debate of the year. It may just break the internet. I'm pumped. I know you guys are pumped. And tonight we are debating the question. The important question: is the Trinity necessary to explain reality? Matt Slick says yes, and Jake says no. But before we get into the debate, gentlemen, what I like to do here on Standing for Truth is get to know the debaters a little bit, kind of break the ice a bit. Jake, it's your first time here on the channel, and so why don't we start with you, Jake? A little bit about yourself and a little bit about your channel.
Yeah, so I'm Jake. I'm a Muslim convert. Grew up Catholic. I run a YouTube channel called The Muslim Metaphysician, where I primarily discuss Christian theology and Islamic theology, some philosophy. I'm also a co-host of another YouTube channel called The Thought Adventure Podcast, where we mainly focus on atheism and responding to certain skeptical objections and demonstrating God's existence, things of that nature. So I have a background in philosophy, and so I have an interest in discussing topics related to theology and philosophy with a specific interest on a comparison between Christian theology and Islamic theology.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that intro, Jake. I do have your the link to your YouTube channel in the description box for people to check out. Okay, Matt Slick, good to have you back. I believe this is your 13th time here. So you're keeping Standing for Truth in business here. So what's going on? Good to have you back. A little bit about yourself.
13, huh? Good thing I'm not triskaidekaphobic. My name is Matt Slick, and I'm the founder and director, president of the Christian Apologetics Research Ministry, which last month turned 27 years old. It's had 152 million visitors. I've written numerous books, been doing radio for almost 18 years, and I've done lots of debates. And I love my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I find salvation and forgiveness of sins in Him, and hope to be able to defend the truth of who God is in the concept of the Trinity. And that's it.
All right, perfect. Thanks for the introduction, Matt. I've got your links, relevant links, that is in the description box for people to check out as well. Link to your channel and then carm.org. Okay, for the audience sake, I'm going to go over the format for tonight. We're having a formal debate starting with 15-minute opening statements. Again, the topic, very important topic, is the Trinity necessary to explain reality? Since Matt says yes, he'll be starting us off in the opening statements. Then we're going to have a round of rebuttal, 10 minutes of uninterrupted rebuttal time, followed by everybody's favorite part of a debate, 40-minute discussion. What we're going to do with that discussion is break it up into two 20-minute cross exams. We'll have Matt lead the way first in terms of that. Then we're going to have 5-minute closing statements, followed by an audience question and answer. So guys, this is where we get you and the audience involved. We're already at 100 people in the chat, so I don't want to miss your questions. So please, if you're sending in your questions, just make sure you're tagging me at Standing for Truth, and that way I won't miss them. Okay, with that being said, we're going to get right into the opening statements, starting with Matt Slick. Matt, we've got 15 minutes, and whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, first of all, before I hit my go button, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Nice meeting you, Jake. We'll hopefully have a good discussion. All right. You ready? 3, 2, 1, go. All right. So our debate topic tonight is whether or not the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. In order to proceed, we must define our terms. The Trinity is one God in 3 distinct simultaneous persons. I'll expand on this in a bit. Reality includes all that exists, including the laws of logic, angels, demons, stars, energy, in our debate here tonight. We are dealing with the Trinity's necessity for reality, not if the Trinity is true. From within my Christian worldview, I assert the Trinity is necessary for reality, and he asserts the Trinity is not necessary. Now, this is very important. The debate falls under the domain of an internal critique, not an external one. An internal critique examines the Trinitarian position on its own merits. An external critique examines the Trinitarian position on the merits of another position. but we are not arguing another position. We are arguing whether or not the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. So this works with the Trinitarian position and examines it for coherence. This does not necessitate that my opponent accepts that the Christian Trinity is true, but that given the Christian Trinity, is it necessary for reality? Remember, the debate title is the Trinity necessary to explain reality? Not, is the Trinity true? That would be an external critique. The latter is a different topic, and that's worth its own debate. Yet Jake must, and he will, attack the truth of the Trinity, because if he does not, then the Trinity is necessary for reality if he can't establish his position. In order to commit, he doesn't want to commit a logical fallacy of an external critique, but he must, in order to avoid that, work within the doctrine of the Trinity and examine its coherence, and more on this in a bit. In light of this, let me offer a syllogism supporting my position. God is necessary to explain reality. God is a Trinity, therefore the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. If premises 1 and 2 are both true, then the conclusion is logically necessary. This would be a valid argument. But let me clarify, a valid argument does not state whether or not the premises are true, but that if they are true, then the conclusion is necessary. I assume that my opponent and I agree that premise 1 is true, that God is necessary to explain reality. Therefore, clear my throat. Therefore, he is left with attacking the second premise, that God is a Trinity. He must prove, he'll try to prove, that the Trinity is false in order to invalidate the syllogism. But to do this, he has to do it from within the Christian worldview, not externally. Otherwise, it's not a valid criticism. He fails to demonstrate that the Trinity is false, and my syllogism stands, and the Trinity is necessary for reality. I will now offer my definition of the Trinity, which I have written and is on the CARM website. The Trinity is one God in three distinct, simultaneous, eternal persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is monotheism. However, the Father is not the same person as the Son, and the Son is not the same person as the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is not the same person as the Father. They're not three gods nor three beings. They are three distinct persons, yet they are all the one God. This deals with divine simplicity. Each has a will, can speak, can love, etc., demonstrating personhood. They are in perfect harmony, consisting of one substance. This deals with the ontological Trinity. If my opponent does not address this definition, then he's not engaging in the debate. If he asserts that there are other so-called definitions of the Trinity, then he's free to debate those so-called definitions with their respective adherents, but not here, because he's debating me and what I believe, not anyone else and what they believe, whether it be John Calvin, Athanasius, William Lane Craig, or the accountant who lives next door. Now, let me define two terms, being and person. The word being refers to the unique essence of the triune God who eternally exists as three simultaneous and distinct persons. In the context of this debate, the abstract universal of being is not an impersonal category that is grounded in anything other than the Christian worldview. That's a critical point. And we'll get to that later, I'm sure. That would be an external category and an invalid external critique. Person deals with the characteristics of personhood, such as self-awareness, awareness of others, having a will, can love, etc. In the context of the Trinity, a person is not an individual being, but is related to the triune God. Now, one of the things that Jake routinely brings up to attack the Trinity are the issues of identity and predication as they relate to the persons of the Trinity. The is, for those who don't know, the is of identity would be a statement like Fido is my dog, and Fido and my dog are identical to each other without distinction. Fido is my dog, the same thing. Therefore, the is demonstrates identity. However, the is of predication would be my dog is brown. The is here predicates a characteristic to my dog. My dog is brown. This designates distinction. So not all dogs are brown. So though it is not merely as simple as this, basically identity deals with the nature of something and predication deals with the attributes of something. Therefore, they are connected. In this case, that something is a Trinity. This relationship of identity and predication in Trinitarianism is equally ultimate. The statement, God is a triune being, is a statement of both identity and predication at the same time, and this is a critical point. Within the statement, God is a triune being, the persons of the Trinity have their ontological unity and functional distinction that eternally exist as part of the being of the triune God, in which is both identity and predication. The three persons are the one God, and the one God is the three persons. It is not as though the three persons are attributes or properties of God, the Trinity. Rather, they are the one God, and the Trinity is the three persons. Therefore, in the context of the Trinity, to state that identity and predication are dichotomous and not harmonious in any way would be a problem because it fails to acknowledge their equal ultimacy in the Christian context. In that Trinitarian context and the requirement of an internal critique, the categories of identity and predication cannot exist independent from the triune God. So they must be understood in that context. After all, it's what we're debating. And they must retain their intricate relationship of representing God equally. Again, God as a triune being is both identity and predication. This is relevant to our debate because my opponent is known for challenging the Trinity by asking, is Jesus God a statement of identity or predication? Now, I don't know if he's going to ask that, but I'll address it nonetheless. First of all, the question does not represent the Christian perspective sufficiently, where identity and predication are equally ultimate in the one God who is the triune being. It is like he is separating, it would be as though if he was separating Jesus from the whole and asking if he has a property of the whole. It would be a fallacious approach. Remember, God as a triune being is both identity and predication, and this relates to Jesus in the hypostatic union, which I'll get to later. Second, asking if Jesus is identical to God in every respect or every aspect is a wrong question because God is a Trinity and Jesus is not the Trinity. This is a fallacy of equivocation. Third, to ask if Jesus is God as an inquiry of predication, where Jesus has some property of the God of the Trinitarian God, does not work either because the divine nature of the person of the divine word is not a property of God. Remember, God as a triune being is both identity and predication. Fourth, the statement Jesus is God can be understood in different senses. Jesus is a single person with both a divine nature and a human nature. This is called the hypostatic union. So Jesus is God in one sense, that he is the divine word that became flesh. The person is the divine word is an aspect or a concrete particular of the Trinitarian being. Yet there is a sense in which the property of divinity is attributed to Jesus because Jesus is a person with two natures. This deals with the communicatio idiomatum, which I'll address. In regard to Jesus and his two natures, there is this doctrine, which I just mentioned, the communicatio idiomatum, where the attributes of both natures are ascribed to the single person. So if my opponent asks, is Jesus God a statement of identity or predication, then is he taking into account the communicatio idiomatum? In other words, is he referring to the person of Jesus who is ascribed both divine and human attributes, or is he referring only to the divine nature of Jesus? See, within this topic of the person and attributes of Jesus rests the one person with many natures in his two natures, which in itself is a reflection of the issue of the one and the many in flesh, an ultimate expression of God's nature in reality. Therefore, in Jesus, we can touch the one and the many, which is the ultimate nature of God revealed. There is a very serious topic that has plagued philosophers for millennia. It deals with what is called the one and the many. It arises when we ask, what is the ultimate nature of reality, which is germane to our discussion? Is reality one thing or ultimately many particular things? If it is one thing, then there are no distinctions between objects like chairs and trees, because they would all be the one thing. This leads to incoherence and undermines truth values as they relate to particulars. If plurality is ultimate, then we've lost unity and coherence between the particulars, and reality becomes a set of unrelated items, and this also undermines coherence and truth values. This is an ancient problem in philosophy that has not been solved by non-Christian philosophers. It's a huge issue today. But this problem is solved in the Trinity because the Christian God is one being and many persons in his divine nature, and therefore the one and many are equally ultimate. It is not an either-or situation. In the Trinity, there is the equal ultimacy of both unity and diversity, the one and the many, identity and predication. Let me elaborate. When we see the reflection of the nature of God in creation, we can look at Genesis 1:1, which says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:26 says, let us make man in our image. In these statements, we are the creation of God in the creation of God. We are unified and diverse. We are humanity and particular humans. This is our reality, and within it, we recognize universals such as chairness and treeness. Also, because we're made in his image, when we can encounter particulars of individual chairs and trees, logic statements, truth, values, and more, we can bring them all into unity, a unity that rests in the nature of God, from whom all categories derive. We can then say that universals like chairness and treeness are equally ultimate with particular chairs and trees because the one and the many have their equal ultimacy in God. Furthermore, the one and the many are reflected in John 1:1, which says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This is a statement of the one and the many, since within it, the one God and the Word have relationship and distinction, as well as identity as God. In addition, since God is one in many, God is a triune being, and since creation is comprised of oneness and manyness, chairs and trees with chairness and treeness, then we can see a correspondence and a consistency in Trinitarianism with reality, and by extension, we can justify all causality, uniformity, and intelligibility. Furthermore, Jesus is an aspect of the one and the many, since he is one person with two natures. In Colossians 1:15-17, it says that he is the creator of all things and holds all things together, which is also referenced in Hebrews 1:3. So Jesus stands in causal relation to the creation in the same way that God, the Trinity, stands in causal relation to reality. In addition, Jesus reflects the one and the many in his personhood with two natures and stands in causal relation to reality per scripture, Colossians 1:15-17, Hebrews 1:3, John 1:1. I could expand on this quite a bit. So let me reiterate as I bring this to a close. The Trinity is not that the individual persons of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are each identical to each other in every respect, because they retain, for example, differences of function. The Father sent the Son, and the Father sent the Holy Spirit, etc. Instead, the persons are aspects of the Trinity. Remember, God is a triune being. This demonstrates both identity and predication, distinction and unity. Along with this are many subtopics that time doesn't allow me to get into tonight. Furthermore, the Trinity is one God in three persons, which deals with the issue of one and many. Since they are equally ultimate in the triune being, then we can make sense of the ultimacy of reality being rooted in both the one and the many of God's nature. That's critical. Therefore, God is necessary for reality to exist because in him is the one and the many, the triune being, unity and diversity. We have predication and we have identity. In him, we have the equal ultimacy of the triune being. Then we can and are able to make sense of the ultimacy of reality, whether it's one or many, being rooted in both the one and many of God's nature. Therefore, God is necessary for reality to exist. God is a Trinity. Therefore, the Trinity is necessary for reality to exist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much there, Matt Slick, for that roughly 15-minute opening statement. Okay, now we're going to hand it over to Jake. Jake, whenever you're ready, you also have 15 minutes, and the floor is all yours. If you need me to share a screen, of course, let me know, and I'll get that up for you.
Let me do that now. 1 second. Okay. Is it coming up?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. All right, good to go?
You're good to go, Jake.
All right. Thank you. I'd like to start off by thanking Donnie and the Standing for Truth channel for hosting the debate this evening, and my opponent, Matt Slick, for participating in tonight's debate. So, the title of tonight's debate is the Trinity necessary to explain reality? I will be arguing that the Trinity is not necessary to explain reality, and Matt will be arguing that the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. This debate is not about whether or not Islam is true, or whether or not a Unitarian conception of God is true or even defensible. This is because, given the nature of the debate title, even if Islam turns out to be false, that doesn't equate to the Trinity being necessary, as there would be a host of other options that Matt needs to rule out in order to bear his burden of proof in this debate. Matt, as an experienced presuppositionalist apologist, should be able to provide us with a sound argument for the necessity of the Trinity, considering the fact that he so frequently argues for it. Nevertheless, I anticipate that Matt will either be unable to even formulate such an argument or will be unable to substantiate one or more of its premises. Van Til states in his work, Christian Apologetics, and I quote, "It is therefore a contradiction in terms to speak of presenting certain facts to men unless one presents them as parts of this Christian system." Close quote. Again, in the same text, Van Til says, and I quote, "Christianity claims to furnish the presuppositions without which a true scientific procedure is unintelligible. Chief of these presuppositions is the idea of God as expressed in the doctrine of the ontological Trinity. In addition, there are the doctrines of creation, of providence, and of God's ultimate plan with the universe. Christianity claims that the very aim and method of science requires these doctrines as their prerequisites. The Christian apologist claims that on presuppositions alone is science possible." These are such bold claims, it is difficult to see how any Christian apologist, including Van Til himself, could ever justify them. What exactly is the argument for how rejecting the claim that the Trinity is necessary somehow entails a contradiction? There doesn't seem to be one. James Anderson, in a paper entitled "If Knowledge Then God, the Epistemological Theistic Arguments of Plantinga and Van Til," states, and I quote, "Among many questions that immediately present themselves, however, one in particular clamors for an answer. What exactly is the argument? We apparently know its conclusion, but what are its premises and its inferences? And how are those premises to be defended? Disappointingly for many of his readers, Van Til never formally states his transcendental argument at any point in his published works, at least not in a detailed way." Close quote. Anderson also claims that no Van Tilian has ever been successful in providing a rigorous construction and defense of Van Til's transcendental argument for the Trinity. The reality is that Van Til promised too much and delivered too little. As a consequence, Van Til has left presuppositional apologists with a puzzle that cannot be solved. So, if Matt is able to defy all the odds tonight and adequately defend his argument for the necessity of the Trinity, it will truly be groundbreaking. We are all eagerly awaiting Matt's attempt. I will now provide 3 positive arguments to demonstrate that not only is the Trinity not necessary to explain reality, but that it couldn't possibly explain reality as the Trinity itself is incoherent. My first argument for this is known as the logical problem of the Trinity. The argument goes like this. Premise 1, the Father is God. Premise 2, the Son is God. Premise 3, the Holy Spirit is God. Premise 4, the Father is not the Son. Premise 5, the Father is not the Holy Spirit. Premise 6, the Son is not the Holy Spirit. Premise 7, there is exactly one God. These 7 premises that Trinitarians affirm form an inconsistent set. In its simplest expression, the contradiction is that the first 6 premises seem to entail that there are 3 gods, but the 7th premise states that there is exactly one God. In other words, if the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are each fully God, and they are not each other, then it follows that there are 3 gods, not one God. This is if you take the is God phrases in premises 1 to 3 to mean an is of predication. If instead we take the is God statements to refer to an identity relation, then another problem ensues. If the Father is identical to God and the Son is identical to God, then it follows from classical identity that the Father is identical to the Son, which would be the heresy of modalism. To complicate things further, Van Tilians like Bosserman and Tipton claim that each person is in fact identical to God, but not identical to each other, which violates classical logic. Bosserman states, and I quote, "The Christian begins with the notion that God is identical with 3 persons," close quote. Tipton likewise states, and I quote, "For a Trinitarian person to subsist as the entire undivided essence means that the Trinitarian person is related to the divine essence by way of identity. Each person in his entirety is identical to the undivided essence of God." After discussing the logical problems with the Trinity and surveying attempts to resolve said logical problems, Reformed philosopher and theologian James Anderson concludes by stating, and I quote, "As the debate stands today, no writer from the 1st century to the 21st century has offered an explication of the doctrine of the Trinity that is both clearly orthodox and free from apparent contradiction. It seems that the careful theologian inevitably faces a dilemma, that of embracing either paradox or heterodoxy. Close quote. Brant Bosserman similarly remarks, and I quote, Van Til's failure to pursue a clearer and more complete vindication of the chief Christian paradoxes has supplied sufficient reason to doubt, for all but his most enthusiastic supporters, that a Trinitarian method of implication carries with it any distinctive benefits. Now, on to my second argument. Call this argument the argument from indexicals. An indexical is a linguistic expression whose reference can change based on the context. Example of indexicals include I, he, she, here, that, etc. Two individuals expressing the same sentence that contains an indexical can be saying different things. For example, if Matt says, quote, I am happy, and John says, quote, I am happy, although they are uttering the same sentence, Matt is saying that he is happy and John is saying that he is happy. How is this related to the Trinity and why is it problematic? Well, the Orthodox Christian belief is that there is one mind or one set of cognitive powers and numerically one will in the Trinity. Matt himself in a video on his channel states, and I quote, all thoughts of each person are eternally known of all of the other persons. No thought is independent or hidden from the other. Therefore, all the thoughts are known simultaneously and eternally, close quote. So, if I can show that there cannot be one set of cognitive powers or one will in the Trinity, then it would render the Orthodox Trinitarian view false. Let's take a simple example to illustrate the point. The Father alone can affirm the proposition, I am the Father. The Son alone can affirm the proposition, I am the Son. Likewise, the Holy Spirit alone can affirm the proposition, I am the Holy Spirit. Scott Williams, a Trinitarian attempting to preserve the one mind, one will model of the Trinity, reluctantly admits, and I quote, the divine persons are aware of different propositions if they use a mental token with the indexical I in it, close quote. However, this is just to admit that the divine persons do not possess the same mental states when they utilize the indexical I. As William Hasker notes and quotes and states the problem as such, and I quote, the persons are able to grasp and to assert propositions containing indexicals. But here's the rub. To be aware of a proposition is precisely to perform a mental act. And we have been told that in this instance, the persons are aware of different propositions, which must surely mean that they are performing different mental acts. What could be clearer than that? If this is so, it cannot be the case that the persons have between them only one set of divine mental powers and only one set of divine mental acts, close quote. There are other examples of unique mental acts that each one of the persons performs. For example, the Father alone knows the proposition, I am unbegotten. The Son alone knows the proposition, I am begotten of the Father. Likewise, the Holy Spirit alone knows, I proceed from the Father and the Son. I can give many more examples, but this should suffice for now. This argument is meant to show that there cannot be one mind or one set of cognitive powers and one will in the Trinity, given the fact that the divine persons cannot have the same thoughts or knowledge. They perform different mental acts that are incommunicable. In light of this problem, a Trinitarian may want to adopt what is called a multi-power view and allow for three sets of cognitive powers and three wills. However, I'd argue that not only would this view be unorthodox and ahistorical, but it would invite accusations of polytheism, which contradicts the Trinitarian claim that there is only one God. How could it be the case that there are three persons, each with their own proper intellect and will, each being considered fully God, and yet there is only one God? If this isn't polytheism, I'm not sure what would qualify as such. My third and final argument is the quadrinity argument. This argument is partly inspired by a recent conversation I had with Matt prior to this debate. In response to how the statement the Father is God is to be interpreted, Matt responded by stating, quote, is the Father equal to God? Well, God by definition is triune. To say that the Father is triune is the fallacy of equivocation. The is of identity isn't going to work. You should abandon that, close quote. Matt here is claiming that when he says each divine person is God, that should be understood in terms of predication, not identity. However, when he says the Trinity is God, that should be understood as an is of identity. This invites a serious dilemma for Matt. It seems like we now have four things which are divine. The Father is divine, the Son is divine, the Holy Spirit is divine, and the Trinity itself is divine. This now seems like a quadrinity instead of a trinity, as there are four things which are divine instead of three. So, what exactly is the Trinity on Matt's view? Is the Trinity merely shorthand for the three persons? That doesn't seem to be the case, given that Matt has identified the Trinity as God. The Trinity doesn't seem to be a mere abstraction. On Matt's view, like many other Trinity theories, the Trinity itself is a concrete entity, which the persons in some sense subsist in. Matt has a serious dilemma on his hands. Let me now work through the problem via the diagram on the screen. If the Trinity is God, then is it a fourth instance of the divine nature? If the answer is yes, then it seems you have four gods instead of three. If the Trinity is not a fourth instance of the divine nature, then either the Trinity is divine or it is not. If the Trinity is not divine, then Matt will abandon his initial claim of identifying the Trinity with God. If the Trinity is divine, then either there is one way to be divine or there are two ways to be divine. If there are two ways to be divine, then this will result in what Brian Leftow calls Plantingian Arianism. One way to be divine is by possessing the divine nature, and the other is by being the Trinity. Regardless, you still have four things which are divine, the Trinity and the three persons. This is one more instance of divinity than orthodoxy allows for. Maybe there is only one way to be divine. This would mean either only the Trinity is God and none of the persons are divine, or only the persons are divine. So, the options for Matt, or the options Matt has to select from are there four gods? The Trinity is not divine. Only the Trinity is God. Only the persons are divine. Or there are two ways to be divine, and there are four divine things resulting in a quadrinity. This person is illustrated in more detail in Brian Leftow's influential paper, Anti-Social Trinitarianism. Another question to consider related to this problem is whether or not the Trinity is omnipotent, omniscient, or omnibenevolent. If the Trinity is said to possess these qualities, then is it a person? If so, then it looks like we have four persons and not three, which is one too many divine persons. If the Trinity is God and does not possess these qualities, then in virtue of what exactly is it divine? One should also note that typically God is understood to be a person. On Matt's model, if the Trinity is God and is not a person, then on Matt's model, God would not be a person. This, of course, doesn't fit with the biblical data in which God is described as an agent that knows things and interacts with his creation. Another complication for the idea that the Trinity is God is that there is no such statement to be found anywhere in the Bible. Can Matt show us a place in the Bible where the term God is used to refer to the Trinity? If he cannot do so, then it seems that Matt's usage of the term God to refer to the Trinity is unbiblical. In summary, Matt needs to provide an argument for the necessity of the Trinity that precludes all other possibilities and not merely Islam or Unitarianism. Matt must also provide an orthodox and logical response to the three arguments I've raised against his position. Otherwise, the Trinity is not only unnecessary, but impossible. Unless Matt can satisfy these conditions, then he will fail to defend his position and as a consequence, lose this debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jake, for that 15-minute opening statement. That concludes the opening statements for tonight's debate. We're now moving into the 10-minute uninterrupted rebuttal round. And Matt, we're going to hand it over to you whenever you're ready. You've got 10 minutes for your rebuttal. The floor is yours. Oh, I think you're on mute, Matt.
Okay, I'm just getting my timer going.
No worries.
All right, let's go. So I don't know if he was listening to the opening statement that I gave, but yes, I did produce an argument for the necessity of the Trinity. God is necessary to explain reality. God is the Trinity, therefore the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. That's an argument, and it's valid, and given the premises, if they're true, then it's also sound. he didn't even begin to touch the issue of the God. Well, he did in a sense. We'll get to these arguments about this. What I thought was interesting is that he quotes Van Til, Anderson, and others. Brent Bosserman. We're not debating Van Til. We're not debating, he's not debating Van Til or Anderson or Bosserman. And what he's doing is simply quoting other people and saying they say this and they say that. That's nice. Debate them. You want to debate them sometime about what they say? That's fine. But you're not debating them. Bringing in their quotes and stuff and saying that they say this is true or not true or incoherent or whatever, it doesn't really matter, because those quotes have to be examined in those contexts. Now, I know Bosserman. I could talk to him and see if what you're saying about what he says is accurate and have the old context. But look, if you're going to debate me what I say, not what they say. Otherwise, you're not involved in the debate. We're not debating them. Now, I'm trying to take notes as fast as I could from what he said, so I can't respond to everything because he was going quickly. And he says, if I can get my notes right, to say that God is identical with three persons is problematic because it separates that's what I'm saying. He seems to be, what he's making a mistake in doing, which I anticipated, and it's really, it's unfortunate, that he doesn't see or recognize the identity and predication in the nature of God. God is a Trinity, and the Trinity is God. And in that, we have the equal ultimacy of the identity and predication, the one and the many. You can't separate these and set them apart as he did as an impersonal category of the Trinity and setting it itself against the persons. We'll get to that in a second. So he did not address my definition of the Trinity, which I clearly teach on CARM, and I've written about it a great deal. My website's right there. All he's got to do is go there. He should be saying, Matt's version of the Trinity is this, and this is why it's a problem or not. But to go to a bunch of other people, and I'll admit, I don't know what all these people said in their contexts, and for me to be able to address everything that they say, I just can't do it, because I don't know what they said in what context. So this is one of the problems with quoting a bunch of other people. You quote a bunch of other people, I'm just going to say, well, debate them on what they said. But you're not debating them on what they said. You're debating me on what I say. So basically, it's a waste of time to do that. Now, you said all thoughts of each person are eternally known by all of them. Yes, that's the necessity of the perichoretic relationship of the three persons in the doctrine of the ontological essence of the Trinity. Now, I don't know if he's familiar enough with the perichoretic relationship or the nature of divine simplicity in the ontos, because it would necessitate that the one God, who is the three persons, has the interpersonal, indwelling perichoretic relationship in which all those thoughts are known. And you reference this kind of thing. There is no problem in that. And to be honest, I couldn't understand the problem he was trying to raise. He was going so fast that I was typing this out, trying to understand what he thinks the problem is, but I couldn't get it. Maybe he can explain it later and we can cross-examine it. So yeah, the Father alone can form the proposition, I'm the Father, and the Son alone can say I'm not the Son can say I'm not the Father. That's true. That's what we say is consistent with Trinitarian thought. The divine persons do not possess the same mental states. Well, that's worth discussion, isn't it? Because if we have a perichoretic relationship and they're mutually interdwelling, then we have to be able to articulate what do you mean by the mental states and how they can or cannot be the same or identity, because this is not as easy as or simple as that. Persons are aware of different propositions. I'm not sure. He's not dealing with the, you're not dealing with the perichoretic relationship as it goes in the divine simplicity. Try to show that there cannot be one mind and a set of cognitive powers, given the fact that this is different persons cannot have the same type of knowledge. Yes, it can. See, just saying this stuff doesn't mean that it's true. In the doctrine of the Trinity, one God exists as a simple being, and yet within him are the three persons who have an eternal perichoretic relationship where all things within are known by all things, and yet they have distinction. This is exactly what the doctrine of the Trinity is. I see nothing from what he said that negates that. Then we said we should adopt a multi-God view, and well, I'm not sure what that was. So I noticed that in his criticism, he didn't address basically anything I said. In fact, he actually ignored some of the stuff I said by saying I didn't provide a logical argument. Yes, I did. And he's got to deal with the syllogism that I offered. You see, the doctrine of the Trinity is what we're debating, not Bosserman, not Van Til, not Calvin, not anybody else, which I stated in the open statement. To reference them is to reference what their positions are. I may or may not agree with everything they're saying, but he's debating me. So don't waste time quoting them. You need to deal with the logic of the issue of the Trinity and its relationship to truth. Now, you got into this issue of, let's see, quadrinity. It sounds that we have four things that are divine: the Father, the Son, the Spirit, and the Trinity. So when he said that, I was really quite confused and surprised, because it seems to me that what he's doing is offering an external critique by using metaphysical categories that are not laid out in and derived from the Trinity. And what he's doing, you got to listen to this. If he's going to say that the Trinity is something separate from the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and therefore you have four things, the Trinity and the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, then he's denying what the Trinity doctrine really is. He demonstrates he doesn't understand what it is, and he seems to be implying that there are metaphysical categories like Platonic norms that exist out there to which he can then apply to the doctrine of the Trinity. That's an external critique, and it is invalid. You see, the doctrine of the Trinity states that the Trinity is the three persons. You don't say the Trinity and the three persons and then say that makes four. That's a misrepresentation of the Trinity. So he said the Trinity, God is the fourth incident of divine nature. No, it's not. It's not a fourth incident, if I got this right, and or fourth aspect of the divine nature. It's a confusion, is what that is, of saying that the Trinity and the three persons, the one Trinity and the three persons, I'm sorry, it just didn't make any sense. I don't see any coherence in that kind of a criticism. And it says, if the Trinity is not a fourth instance. And see, what do you mean by instance? You mean an ontological essence and an instance of actuality that exists, or you mean a category? And if you're going to talk about the particular that relates to the universal of the category, what are you defining that to be? You got to get into this kind of stuff if you're going to bring this kind of stuff up, because the universal quality and characteristic of God's self-revealed as self-referential Trinitarian nature, which is what we would call the secondary substance, consists of the primary substances of the person of this Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And therefore, to separate them is to misrepresent the Trinity, to not understand the logic of the substances, nor does it convey any real serious understanding of the nature of the doctrine of the Trinity. So I'm really kind of surprised, because I thought he'd have a better understanding of the Trinity. In fact, he said in a discussion we had a week or so ago, he said two things. He says, I'm demon possessed, and he said, he knows more about the Trinity than I do. Well, maybe that's the case, but for now, it certainly doesn't seem like that's the case, because he's confusing items, confusing categories, and bringing out things that are not relevant to the doctrine of the Trinity. So omnis, I don't know if I can address that. And the idea that the Trinity statement or the word not found in the Bible. Seriously? The word atheism is not found in the Bible, but is taught in the concept is taught in Psalm 14. The issue is whether or not the Trinity is true in the Bible. That's a different study altogether. You see, we're arguing the Trinity, not whether the Trinity is true according to what you think the Bible has to say about it, because you're risking an external critique in here. I'm really surprised that you're not sticking with the debate, but you're going elsewhere, talking about different things. Now, I got a minute left. I raised many issues here in my opening statement. I hope he takes the time to deal with them. The syllogism, God is necessary to explain reality. God is the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. Also, the issue of the equal ultimacy of the predicate and the identity statements found in God as a triune being. There's the issue of the one and the many, which, when we ask what is the ultimate nature of reality, what is the ultimate nature? Is it one or is it many? And I already went through the issues, don't have time to go, we're almost out of time. He's got to deal with this as well. If he can't answer this, and he's not been able to explain how reality relates to the nature of the Trinity exists, because that's a debate topic. Is the Trinity necessary to explain reality? He's got to deal with what I said, not with what Calvin said, not Bosserman, not anybody else. He's got to deal with what I said. Otherwise, he's not involved in the debate. And apparently, I'm getting the impression he doesn't understand what the Trinity really is, because otherwise he wouldn't say a lot of the statements he has already misconstrued as a representation of the Trinity. Out of time.
Okay, Matt, thank you so much for that 10-minute rebuttal. We are now going to hand it over to Jake. Jake, you have your 10-minute uninterrupted rebuttal. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm good to go. All right, so we just heard Matt's rebuttal. I'm quite shocked because Matt, as an experienced debater, made a huge blunder and a huge mistake. He's criticizing me for not responding to his opening statement in my opening statement. Now, that's just laughable, Matt. You should know, being an experienced debater, that my opening statement is not meant as a response to your opening statement. Now is my chance to respond to your opening statement. And if I get the time to do so, partially what you just said there in your first rebuttal. So it seems like you want to talk a lot about the nature of this debate and me not understanding what this debate is about. It seems like you don't even understand how debates work, to be quite frank. Now, Matt makes a big to-do about I'm debating him and not others. Yes, that's correct, but you're coming from a particular tradition. I'm interacting with the literature in that tradition, and I suspect that you hold similar views given my research and what I've seen you said in other places. And I don't think that there's very much different from them in any sense. Let's deal with, and I'm going to try to deal with as much as what Matt had to say. His argument for the necessity of the Trinity. So he says, premise 1, God is necessary to explain reality. Premise 2, God is a Trinity. And then the conclusion is supposed to be, therefore, the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. Now, I want to know from Matt in premise 1 how the term God is meant to be functioning there. Is the term God meant to be functioning as somewhat synonymous with the Trinity? Because if that's the case, you're just saying the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. Now, what actually is the argument for that? The only argument that I've seen you give thus far is this idea of the so-called problem of the one and the many. I don't think that you're very good at articulating what the problem is. And I don't think it's on my fault that I'm not able to understand very clearly exactly what the problem is. It seems like you're talking about universals and particulars and how they can be unified and whether or not what ultimate reality is can have equal ultimacy and all of this. But it's not really clear why the Trinity is supposedly unique in solving this problem. First of all, it's not even clear exactly what the problem is because you didn't give a formal argument for exactly what you're stating there. Now, we can get into more detail maybe when you flesh out a little bit better of what you're actually saying with this argument, whether or not there are other views available. But you certainly haven't established that by someone merely rejecting the claim that the Trinity is necessary in order to solving the problem of the one and the many, that we are guilty of some logical contradiction. You haven't established that at all. And this is part of the reason why James Anderson himself and why he's relevant is because he is an expert on the topic. He is an expert on Van Til. And I'm sorry to say, but he knows a lot more than you, Matt. And I think you should probably consult him on this topic. And he has written and published academic articles on the subject. And he explicitly has said to me that nobody has been able to formulate or defend such an argument from Van Til going forward. And it doesn't seem like you're doing a very good job of that either. Now, you also mentioned this idea about the one person of Christ and two natures. So you have one and many, you have a particular, which is the person, and presumably the two natures, which are universals. I don't understand how the Trinity is supposed to be unique into solving this, or why there's something unique about this with Christ, because even if I granted such a thing, there's nothing inherent to the idea of the Trinity that it necessitates that it's an explanation of this phenomenon of universals and particulars. You haven't established that at all. You've just been asserting it, and you haven't shown in any depth whatsoever how me denying that somehow entails a contradiction. You said that the persons are not identical to each other. Well, that's good to know. And you also stated that they're aspects of the Trinity. I hope to flesh that out a bit more, just exactly what you mean by the fact that the persons are aspects of the Trinity. Now, let me see, just going through some of my notes here. So, yeah, you were pretty repetitive in some of your points. Now, you also stated here, when you say that the God is a Trinity, that somehow is a statement of identity and predication. I'd like to understand what you mean a bit more about that. But my question is, when you say that the Father is God, is that an is of predication or an is of identity? Hopefully we're going to get some clarity on that in the cross-examination or the discussion section. Now, At a certain point, when you were dealing with the second argument that I gave, which was based on the problem of indexicals, you said you're not sure whether or not the persons are aware of different propositions. Well, you stated, due to perichoresis, or the mutual indwelling of the persons within the Trinitarian Godhead, you stated that all of the persons have the same mental states and access and knowledge. And my argument, based on the argument from indexicals, was a refutation of that. You haven't responded to it whatsoever. And in fact, when you started quoting the propositions like I am the Father and I am the Son, you agreed, at least it appeared that way, that each one of the persons in some sense uniquely knows that, or knows that uniquely in a certain way. And if that is the case, then they cannot equally share all the same thoughts in exactly the same way. And if that's the case, then the idea that they do have all the same thoughts eternally is incoherent. So it seems like you were either conceding that argument, or I don't know, because you admitted that you weren't sure whether or not they were aware of different propositions. But I gave an argument for that, and I didn't get a clear response to that. You mentioned divine simplicity. I mean, the idea, I don't know what you understand by divine simplicity, but the idea that you think that the Trinity is consistent with divine simplicity is just laughable, because divine simplicity says that whatever is in God is God, which just means that it's identical to God. Well, that's going to fall flat on its face when it comes to the Trinity, because you've already admitted that the persons are not identical to each other. So how is it the case that the Father can be identical to God, which I don't even know if you're confirming that or not yet. And if the Father is identical to God and the Son is identical to God, then it just follows by classical identity that the Father is identical to the Son, which is a heresy of modalism. Now, you also made a big to-do about me misunderstanding the Trinity and my arguments being based on misunderstandings of the doctrine of the Trinity. Well, maybe we can explore that in the cross-examination or discussion section, but I don't think that's the case. I think that was a lot of rhetoric from you, Mr. Slick, which I'll give you credit for. You are quite slick with the rhetoric. And a lot of gaslighting, quite frankly. There was no argument to demonstrate that any of my arguments were based on misrepresentations. It was just a claim as such. Now, let's see, what else? I think I've dealt with most of what you had to say. If I did miss out anything, you could question me on it in the discussion section, and I'm happy to get into some of these points a bit later. But let me give you a further point that I'd like to make about this one mind and one will situation. Okay, which is, how is it the case that the persons of the Trinity share not only all of the same thoughts, okay, so that they have the same mind, and all of the same actions such that they have the same will? Well, Leftow actually quotes, or I'm going to give you a quote from Brian Leftow, who discusses this problem. He says this: the problem comes with the claim that all thoughts, intentions, and actions of God belong to the Trinity as a whole. Again, orthodoxy has it that the Father begets the Son. In Williams's proposal, which is similar to what Matt Slick is saying, which they share all of the same thoughts, intentions, and actions, not just the Father, but the Son does the begetting. And so the Son brings himself to be. Meaning, if the Father begets the Son, and that's an action of the Father, if the Son performs all of the same actions, then it would have to be that the Son begets himself, which is incoherent. So then Leftow goes on further to say, further, presumably, the Father begets the Son intentionally. So the Father intends to beget the Son, and so in Williams's proposal, the Son intends this too, causally before he exists. Williams can avoid this and like impossibilities only by denying the Trinitarian processions. So his view is either impossible or, again, theologically unacceptable. The point is, how is it the case that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit all have the same thoughts, intentions, and perform all of the same actions when the very nature of the Trinitarian processions presumes that the Father uniquely performs a specific action, which is the begetting of the Son, and it would be impossible for the Son to do so because that would mean that he is the cause of himself, which is incoherent. Now, I hope that Matt in the cross-examination section will be able to get into some of these issues a bit further, and I thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jake, for that 10-minute rebuttal. Gentlemen, that wraps up both the concluding statements and the rebuttals. We're now moving into the 40-minute discussion. Since this discussion portion is broken up into two portions of 20 minutes of cross-exam each, let's try to do our best to allow each other to answer the questions with as little interruptions as possible, but let's also keep our questions and answers concise and appropriately timed. So with that being said, Matt, we're going to give you the first 20 minutes to lead the way. And guys, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right, I'm hitting it now. All right, Jake, is a statement God is a triune being, is that a statement of identity, of predication, or both?
According to who?
According to what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, different people have different views. So if you're asking me my view, that's a different story.
I'm talking to you, not anybody else. You're talking to me, not anybody else. So I'm asking you, is the statement God is a triune being a statement of identity, of predication, or is it both?
I don't have a view on that.
You can't develop a view on the simplicity of the issue of identity and predication as it relates to God?
I don't believe in the Trinity. So you're asking me my view. I don't have a view on that.
It's not an issue if you believe in the Trinity. It's whether or not the statement, God is a triune being, is a statement of identity, predication, or both. You should be able to.
I can't answer that question. I can't answer that question without presuming background beliefs, which I don't hold to.
You don't have to presume background belief to do this. You should know this. You talked about how I'm supposed to know this and know that about the issues of whatever. You're supposed to do the same thing. You should know this already. That's a mistake. The statement is both in the Christian worldview, and I already gave you the answer. You don't have to assume the validity of the Christian worldview. It's the issue of whether the logic is consistent or not.
Okay, Matt, do you have a question for me?
Yes. Are you familiar, since you failed on that one, are you familiar with the perichoresis? Do you know what it is?
Yeah.
Could you please explain what it is in the context of the Trinity?
Yeah, it's the mutual indwelling of the persons in the Trinity eternally. And it goes along with what we were talking about earlier, that they share the same thoughts, desires, intentions, etc., and actions.
Okay. You spoke of the Son in relationship to God as a Trinity. Now, are you familiar with the hypostatic union?
Yes.
And what is that?
It's the fact that Jesus, the Word of God, became a man in Jesus of Nazareth, and he was one person with two natures, fully divine and fully man. The natures are not mixed or mingled with one another. They are he possesses them both fully, and that's it. I mean, I don't know how much detail you want on it.
That's very good, actually. I'm impressed. Thank you for getting that correct. Do you affirm that what you just said is true?
In what sense? That I believe that that's an accurate description, or that I believe that that's actually a reality?
Do you believe that Jesus is actually that?
No.
Yet you understood that, yet you can't say is a statement God is triune being a statement of identity, predication, or both, because you don't affirm the Trinity. Yet you don't affirm the hypostatic union, but you had no problem answering that question. Inconsistency. Yeah. Right.
Do you have a question, Matt?
Yes. So are you also familiar with the communicatio idiomatum?
Yes.
What is that?
It's the idea that the properties that are typically ascribed to each one of the natures, the divine nature and the human nature, are likewise predicated of the one person of Christ, so that they get communicated to the divine person, the Son of God.
Good. Actually, I got to give you credit. Seriously, you know this pretty well. I'm kind of surprised, but that's good. I'm glad. All right, so given that Jesus is this, the communicatio idiomatum and the hypostatic union, then would you separate his natures in discussions of his personhood?
No.
Okay. So when speaking of Jesus as he relates to the Trinity, then you must presuppose, at least from this context, both the hypostatic union and the communicatio idiomatum, right?
Yeah, in the Christian worldview, the case is that the Son of God possesses two natures, a divine nature and a human nature, and the properties of each are ascribed to the Son.
Then given that, wouldn't it be true that Jesus possesses a deity since he has the divine nature in this position?
No.
You just said that the hypostatic union, which is, for those who don't know, go over it again, one person and two natures, and the communicatio idiomatum, that the two natures have properties ascribed to the one person. This means Jesus, the one person, has the properties of divinity, which is what he just affirmed is that teaching. And then I asked, in light of what he affirmed the teaching is, not that he has to believe it, but that's what the Trinity or the doctrine is, I asked, then from that, does Jesus have a aseity, which means eternal nature of his divine essence and all that stuff? Then he said, no. So are you want to maintain that is how you want to be consistent that way? Do you see an inconsistency in how you affirm one and deny the other?
No, because the Orthodox doctrine of the Trinity states that the Son, in terms of his personhood, when it comes to his personhood, does not have the property of aseity. He is eternally caused by the Father, and that is what the Nicene Creed teaches. Now, if you reject that, that's another story.
Yeah, it would be, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, when you want to ask me questions relating to that. So, yes, just so you know, you're inconsistent in that you are able to articulate hypostatic union communicatio idiomatum, and that within that, which necessitates that he has aseity, you say he doesn't have aseity. That's a contradiction. In a discussion that you and I had, you said that I was demon-possessed. And you said that you know more about the Trinity than I do. I'm just curious, do you still affirm that position?
Which part? Both the demon possession and the knowledge?
Yeah.
Well, Matt, you started off by initially you the one that forwarded and said, well, I think you may be demon possessed. You stated it as such, and I just simply returned the favor. It was a bit of a joke, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Well, I understand that, but if I say anything, I would probably have said oppressed, and there's certainly an open room of confusion. So, do you think you still think you know more about the Trinity than me? I'm just curious. It might be possibly true. Just want to know what your opinion is.
Yes.
Have you read my 500-word statement on the Trinity?
Where is it? On your website? Depends which article, because you have a lot of articles on the Trinity. I've read a lot of them.
Well, good. Thank you. I'm glad that's the case. I have written a 500-word argument and then went through and did 5 teaching sessions on that, going through all kinds of doctrines. So anyway,
yeah, I watched all those. I watched all of those videos and I took notes, and okay. I read the transcript, I believe, that goes along with them.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. Are you familiar with the primary and secondary substances in metaphysics?
Yes.
Okay, good. Can you explain what they are, the differences?
Yeah, so primary substances are basically particular things like living organisms, inanimate objects, and you could even ascribe it to parts. Secondary substances are things like the species or the genera of those things.
So a primary substance would also be a particular, and a secondary substance in metaphysics dealing with this topic, a secondary substance would be the universal, not exactly one-to-one, but in those categories. So
you can say something similar, yeah.
Yeah, it's similar. So each person of the Trinity is a primary substance of the secondary substance. Would you agree or disagree with that?
In your view, I guess we can go with that.
From the Christian, well, I guess right. You wouldn't agree with that, of course, but do you understand from the Christian perspective that the primary substance is an individual particular aspect of the secondary substance?
Yeah, but see, part of the problem, Matt, is that you're asking me questions about the Christian view and the Trinitarian view, and I think that's a misnomer. I don't think there is anything like that. I think that's a smokescreen and a misrepresentation. I think there are many different views on the Trinity, and I think you're representing a particular one.
You're not arguing the different views or the different individuals. Let me get you back on track yet again. You're arguing with me and my definition, what I've stated, which you have stated. You've already read a lot of what I've said on the doctrine of the Trinity. And so we're not arguing about them. All right. So.
Yeah, but you're saying the Trinitarian view. That's the way you're phrasing the question.
Okay.
So if you say Matt Slick's view, then I can answer.
And I've already said that we're not arguing anybody else but what I'm stating. So when I say the Trinitarian view, it's in context. It's a Trinitarian view that I'm holding, not anybody else's.
So then I'll just interpret it as Matt Slick's view. Okay.
Yeah, please do. So can you explain exactly how the is a predication, which posits that a substance has a property, applies to the persons as they relate to the Trinity?
Can you re-ask that? I didn't understand it.
Okay. The is a predication, an attribute, right, of a
Yeah.
substance. Posit the substance has a property. How does that apply to the persons, the substances as they relate to the Trinity? Can you explain that? I wonder if you understand my position.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
All right.
You maybe could ask it a different way.
We'll go to something else. So did you hear, now I can understand you may not have heard, I'm not trying to be insulting in this. Did you follow the syllogism that I gave at the opening?
Yeah.
Okay. So is a syllogism valid?
Your syllogism? I ask you a question about it, so I'm not really sure.
God is necessary to explain reality. God is a Trinity. Therefore, the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. Do you agree that that is a valid argument?
Yeah, well, what does the term God in premise 1 mean?
God is necessary to explain reality. God is a Trinity. So Trinity is necessary to explain reality. Okay. You could say it's tautologous, but we're showing distinction here because it is a predication and identity. But the basic thing is we're talking about God. I say God's necessary to explain reality and that God is a Trinity. Therefore, the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. Is that a valid argument?
Well, I'm just asking what's the meaning of God in premise 1?
Okay. God is the single divine being.
Is God equivalent to the Trinity in premise 1? Or is that a different reference?
It would be the same. God is necessary to explain reality, but we're differentiating and showing the particular aspect of who God is from the Christian perspective by saying is a Trinity.
It just seems like to me that premise 1 and the conclusion are identical, and you just swapped out the word God for the Trinity because the term you say premise 1, God is necessary to explain reality, right? And in that sentence, God is identical with the Trinity, and in the conclusion it says, therefore, the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. So it's just a restatement of the first premise.
That's good. Yeah, we call that triviality, but triviality does not mean it's not valid. So when God is necessary to explain reality, we're talking about the being who is God. Then we're differentiating who God is as a Trinitarian position. If God is necessary, which what you and I both agree is the case, and then I say that God is a Trinity, well, then I'm differentiating between that God and the Trinity, and then by that necessitating saying the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. So is it a valid argument?
What I'm reading is premise 1, the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. Premise 2, God is a Trinity, which is just another tautological statement. And premise 3, therefore, the Trinity is necessary to explain reality. So it just seems like a complete tautology.
Well, we've gone over this. How much time we have left? Just curious.
I don't know.
Good question. Let me check right here.
I think 7 minutes and
8 minutes.
40 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into the issue of the one and the many. You said that you were not really able to articulate what it is. Do you want to try and articulate what it is? Because I stated what it is. I want to know if you can deal with it.
You want me to what? Steel man what your argument is?
No, what is the problem of the one and the many?
As far as you articulated it?
Just what is it? Well, let's see what you know.
Yeah, but I'm trying to understand the question. As far as you articulated it?
In philosophy,
yeah,
the issue and the problem of the one and the many, can you articulate it?
Not, I don't think that your representation of it is accurate. I mean, it just seems like to me, Matt, that when you're asking or speaking about the problem of the one and the many, you're talking about universals and particulars, and how is it the case that we have this unity amongst universals and particulars, and what is the grounding of this reality? Is it fundamentally like a simple being that is only one, and not many? And you want to argue that the Trinity is both one and many, and so it somehow provides a better explanation of anything else because of the one and the many that exists in reality. That's the way that I understand it.
I just asked you if you could articulate what the problem is in philosophy of the one and the many. That's a problem. Can you articulate it?
Yes. As far as I know, you're just simply referring to the problem of universals.
Okay, you're not explaining what the problem is. Can you?
Yeah, I am explaining.
Try again.
I just explained
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Yeah.
It's the problem of universals. No, you're not. Go ahead. Try it again.
Yeah, because that's the way that you're explaining it. You're just
No,
saying
it's
that
not.
we have. You're saying we have universals and we have particulars. What's the grounding for the relationship between them and the fact that they exist?
Okay, I guess you weren't. I don't know. Maybe you weren't paying attention at the beginning of the my opening. The problem of the one and the many deals with the ultimate nature of reality.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And the reality is ultimately one thing or ultimately many particular things.
Is that not what I said, Matt?
No, it's not what you said.
I just said. I
You said
did. I just clearly
universals.
said. I just clearly said your position is speaking about what is fundamental reality to ground the one and the many. Is it fundamentally only one, or is it fundamentally many? And your position is that it's both one and many, equally ultimate.
Very good. Now we're getting someplace. Okay. So if it is the one thing, then there are no distinctions between objects like chairs and trees. And so that's a problem. And then if it's many, then we've lost unity and coherence between particulars and reality. Okay. So
I don't understand that. Why is that the case, Matt?
Why is what the case? Well, you can ask me
Why?
during your cross-examination. So have you solved the problem of the one and the many?
I think so.
You have solved the problem of the one and the many when all the philosophers that I'm aware of and have read have not.
What's your citation for that?
I said all the ones that I have read, I'm not going to give you citations. I'm saying the ones that I've read and studied, they still say it's a problem, but you're saying you've solved it. Could you give me a solution then to the problem of the one and the many, and what is the ultimate essence of reality?
The ultimate essence of reality?
The ultimate thing that reality is. You say you've solved it, and the issue of the one and the many is a problem. If it's one thing, there are no distinctions between objects, like chairs and trees. Because
I don't understand that. That's why I asked you that. I don't understand where you get that idea from.
I thought you understood what the one and the many was.
I do, but I don't understand what your argument for that claim is.
Okay, now I'm confused because I asked you what it was. You didn't seem to know what it was. Then you seem to know what it is after I tell you what it is. And then you say it doesn't make sense. But
no, I know what the problem is, but what is your argument that one singular thing cannot be responsible for many?
I didn't say it was or wasn't. I said, what is your explanation for the one and the many? What is it?
Yeah, but then when you're setting up what the problem is and you're saying, here are the two options, and these two options are insufficient, I don't hear why that's the case. You're just stating it as such.
The problem of the one and the many, I've already restated it several times. I'm asking you if you have a solution for the problem of the one and the many. You either do or you don't. Do you have a solution?
I don't even think that the way that you've stated it, there really is such a problem.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's right.
So if everything is one thing, then there's no distinctions between objects like chairs and trees, because that would all be one thing. This leads to incoherence. That's not a problem?
What's your argument for that?
So do you understand the issue here?
If I don't understand your claim.
Are you serious? Really?
Yeah, I'm dead serious.
Wow.
Dead serious.
I thought you knew this stuff.
You're claiming if reality or the fundamental nature of reality is fundamentally one, then you cannot have. No, you said that if it's fundamentally one, then you can't have diversity from that. And I'm asking what the argument is.
That's what it is. If everything's fundamentally one, how do you justify diversity? That's the problem. Socrates, Plato, other philosophers, Kant, they've gone through all kinds of stuff trying to deal with this as other philosophers have. It has not been solved. I want to know if you have solved and are able to articulate a solution that can explain which is the ultimate nature of reality. Is it one thing or is it many? So let's start off with that. So what's your view? Is the ultimate nature of reality one thing or many things? What is it?
Both.
Oh, okay, good. Welcome to Trinitarianism. Because in the Trinity, the equal ultimacy of the one and the many exists as one God in three distinct persons. I'm glad that you affirm that position. How much time have we got left, Donnie?
You've got exactly 1 minute. So I would say time for, maybe 2 questions, depending on how quickly we can get them out.
Sure. this issue, I don't know if we can have enough time to get through a discussion here on the issue of the fourth aspect or quality aside from the persons of the Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could talk about that later, because we obviously don't have time to get into it. We got less than a minute. But that, to me, was a profound misunderstanding. Maybe we can get into that a little bit. Sorry, we're just out of time. Don't have the ability to get to other questions with that time remaining.
Yeah, I mean, I can explain what the argument is, and then we can talk about it more in my 20 minutes. But it's just to say that the Father being divine, the Son being divine, and the Holy Spirit being divine, and in your model of the Trinity itself is also God or divine in some sense. Then we have four things which are divine because they're not identical to each other, just as the persons aren't, and they're not identical to the Trinity. You have four things, each of which are divine. You have four divine things.
Okay, guys, that is time. 20 minutes. Appreciate the engaging cross exam there. We're now going to, I'll reset the clock for another 20 minutes. Jake, you get to lead the way. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay. So Matt, I want to deal first of all with your syllogism here. When you say in premise 1, God is necessary to explain reality, does God in the first premise refer to the Trinity?
In there, it does not. No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. So you think that the term God can refer to something other than the Trinity?
Ultimately, no. But if we're going to talk logic, when the concept of God is proposed and we understand that God, because you and I both have a concept of God, so you and I would both agree with premise 1, that's not a problem. That's why I put it that way. The second premise is what differentiates your position and my position. I say God's a Trinity. This is where we differentiate, and that's why it's worded that way.
Yeah, but I think you're just assuming that God in the first premise is also referring to the Trinity, because when I responded with that in your section of the cross-examination section, you seem to agree with that, and you said you had no problem with it being tautological.
Yeah, you said that in the ultimate sense, is it that? But now what we're talking about is we're going to cross-examine this. I just said God is necessary for reality. You and I both agree that that's the case, right? Right, we do. Not a problem. And so I'm going to say now God's a Trinity. You would be saying God's a unity, a Unitarian view. And then the premise, the conclusion is logically necessary from the premises if both are true. That's all. Not a problem.
Yeah, but again, the point is that you're assuming that the referent in premise 1 is the Trinity, and therefore premise 1 and the conclusion are just a restatement of each other. But anyway, I want to move on.
Can you hear me just clarify that? You just misrepresented me.
No, I went over it 2 or 3 times, Matt. This is my time.
I just
want to move on
clarified
to
it again. Yes.
Yeah, I'll move on to my next question. My next question is, when you say that the Father is God, is that an identity statement or a statement of predication?
The problem there is that it separates the Father from the nature of God in the Trinitarian context. And so what we would say is that the Father is, I don't like to use the word part, but the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all God. We don't say one of them is God, because then you get into the fallacy of equivocation when you say, well, what does he mean by God? So I could ask you at this point, well, what do you mean by God at that point when you say Jesus, the Father's God? What do you mean?
Yeah, I'm asking you, when you say that the Father is God, do you know what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, that the Father has a divine quality.
Okay, so the Father has a divine quality. So that is being used in terms of an is of predication. Divinity is being predicated of the subject, which is the Father, correct?
In that sense, yes.
Okay, and then we would say the same thing about the Son and the Holy Spirit. So now the question is, how don't you have 3 gods?
Because God is a triune being is a definition of the Christian Trinity. And what you've done is you've ignored the fact that that the Trinity is 3 persons, and the 3 persons is the one God. When you say God, I say he has a divine quality. The divine quality is the essence of divinity itself, which includes the idea of Trinitarianism of the 3 persons, but in the divine quality, but in that is distinction within that. And so the Father is an aspect of that. You got to be careful how you word this, because then you're going to do is get into equivocation and what's called the fallacy of composition.
No, but you're still saying that the Father whatever the Father is and divinity is, the Father possesses fully what it takes in order to be God. He's fully divine. The Son is fully divine. The Holy Spirit is fully divine. It just follows from that, if you have three things, each of which are fully divine, and they're not identical to each other, then the way in which we count nouns, it would be three gods.
What do you mean by fully divine?
Each one of them fully possesses whatever it takes to be qualified as divine or God.
Yeah, that's a Trinitarian position.
Exactly, which would then follow that you have three gods, because you have the Father who is God, the Son who is God, the Holy Spirit who is God, and they're not each other. It's just like what you said before about the universal and the particular. Each one of the persons fully possesses a universal, and they are particulars, in the same way that you gave the example about lamps, and you can say it about chairs or trees or anything else. The fact that each one of the persons fully possesses the universal divine nature, and they are particular instances of it, that therefore means that in the same way that we count three lamps that are three particular lamps, we would count three gods.
No. To say he's fully divine simply means that the divine quality of God is in the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We don't want to make the equivocation fallacy of saying the Father is a God or in any way hint of that, because as soon as you do that, you're not talking about the Trinity anymore. The Trinity is that God is three persons, and the three persons are God. And don't make the mistake of thinking that distinction is different, is the same thing as separation. It's not. Distinction shows the commonality of their existence in the perichoretic relationship with the divine simple being, not that they're separate, but that they are distinct and simultaneous and mutually indwelling in the perichoretic relationship. It seems to me that what you're doing is confusing distinction and separation and then setting them apart and then saying, hey, now there's four, which is not the Christian Trinitarian position.
Matt, how many persons are there in the Trinity?
Three.
Okay, and why is that? Why are there three instead of one?
Well, if you want to have a Bible study with me sometime, we can go through it and I can show you how the Trinity's arrived at logically.
No, I'm just saying, why do you count them as three persons instead of one person?
Well, because of statements in the Bible like Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Is it because they have different aspects or properties?
They all have the same divine property, but they also have distinction and function.
In other words, the Father is unbegotten and the Son is begotten, correct?
Yes, but in what sense are you talking about being begotten?
Well, that's irrelevant. The point is,
no, it's not.
Yeah, it is irrelevant, because whatever it is, they do not share all of the same properties, in the sense that the Father has personal properties that the Son doesn't have, and vice versa. Do you agree to that?
It depends what you mean by properties as they relate to the ontos.
Meaning that the Father is unbegotten and the Son is not unbegotten.
That's called the economic Trinity. I thought you said you know about the Trinity more than me. You do know about the economic aspect of the Trinity, right?
It has nothing to do with the economic Trinity.
Yes,
that has to do with the ontological Trinity, Matt. How could you make such a blunder?
How could you make such a blunder? I ask you, what is the issue of the begotten? So which is it? You have to define, is it temporal or logical begetting? Do you even know the difference?
Yeah, I do. And the act of begetting is a metaphysical explanation. It's not just a name or title that is attached to the Father and to the Son.
So I don't know what sense you're talking about. You're talking about temporal, or you're talking about logical?
If you want to go into the quotes of the church fathers, they say that the Son causally, eternally causes the Son to exist. That's the position.
I would just say logically or temporally.
It's understood as something like a grounding relation. It's an asymmetrical dependency relation.
I don't see if you understand the question I'm asking, but you're supposed to be asking me questions.
I'm explaining to you. I'm explaining to you. The fact of the matter is that the begetting or the divine procession relations is not related to the economic Trinity. It has to do with the ontological Trinity, because the ontological Trinity has to do with the relation of the Trinitarian persons apart from creation. The economic Trinity has to do with the roles and the relations of the persons as they relate to creation, not within themselves. And the fact that you don't know this basic distinction is quite shocking, Matt. I don't understand how you don't know this.
Well, continue to be shocked, because I think you're the one who doesn't get it.
Wow, this is
I've sat
unbelievable.
here. Yeah, I've been teaching on the Trinity for years and years. Look, I've asked you about. You're supposed to ask me, but you're not clarifying the
I
issue.
asked you a question. How do you understand what ontological Trinity means?
Ontological Trinity deals with the essence of the Trinitarian being one simple thing, the divine thing.
So it doesn't have to do with the relationship between the persons apart from creation. That's your claim?
That's the economic Trinity, because there's always an interpersonal differentiation, because from eternity, Ephesians 1:4, the Father elected in the Son from before the foundation of the world. That's an eternal covenant relationship that has always existed in the ontological Trinity, which necessitates a simultaneous economic Trinity relationship before creation ever existed. You should know that. If you understand Ephesians chapter 1 and the ontological Trinity and the economic Trinity, and the issue of eternal generation, the issue of the begetting, the issue of the decrees, you should know that, and you wouldn't be asking that question.
Is eternal generation related to the ontological Trinity or to the economic Trinity?
Both.
Okay, both, because before you just said it wasn't a part of the ontological Trinity.
No, I didn't say it's not just an ontological Trinity issue.
I said it was the ontological Trinity, and you said no, it isn't.
No, I don't remember what the context was, what we're saying. So why don't you, because seriously, a lot's going on.
Now you're changing your answer.
No, I have the same answer. So
okay,
when you talk about
the tape.
Well, yeah, you can, and people misspeak and they say things, and what do you mean in this context? But the issue here is are you demonstrating? Are you trying to? I'm not supposed to ask you the questions, because you still haven't explained to me the difference between temporal and.
So let's try to get back
to the issue of the begetting.
Let's try to get back on track, Matt. So I want to move on to my second argument, which was related to the problem of indexicals. Now, Matt, do you understand what an indexical is?
No, I do not.
Okay, so then is that part of the reason why you didn't understand what my argument was?
Probably.
Okay, so an indexical, as I stated, is a linguistic expression whose reference can be changed based on the context. And I gave examples of this. It includes things such as the word I. So for example, when I say that I, Jake, am happy, and Matt Slick says that I am happy, the same sentence, okay, is being expressed, but the reference is being changed based on the context. Now, do you understand what that means?
Yes.
Okay, so likewise, when the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit use the term I, do you understand how that would mean that they have a different referent?
They would be distinct, show distinction, which is consistent with the Trinity. Yes.
Okay, so the Father uniquely knows that the proposition I am the Father, and the Son doesn't know that proposition in the same way that the Father does, correct?
I don't understand what you by know it in the same way. Seriously, I don't understand what you mean by that.
Okay, so when I say that I know that I am Jake, do you know that proposition in the same way that I do?
I don't, seriously, I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't understand what you mean by the word know. What do you mean? Experientially, logically? I'm not sure what you mean.
From a first person perspective.
Well, I can understand intellectually what you're saying, but I'm not experiencing it from your perspective.
Right, so you don't know it in the same sense that I know it. Correct?
Right. Yours is experiential. Mine would just be, I guess you could say, epistemological.
Okay. So in the same way, we have that instance in the Trinity that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit cannot know the same propositions in the same sense, in the same way that Matt Slick and Jake cannot know the proposition that I am Jake or I am Matt in the same way, correct?
Yeah, now I get what you're saying. So let me reiterate. You're saying that they can't know the same proposition because their identities are different. Their persons are different. So they can't say, the Son can't say, I am the Father, right?
Correct. And the Father cannot say, I am the Son. The Son cannot say, I am unbegotten. The Father cannot say that he possesses a divine nature.
Well,
that he possesses a human nature. Sorry. So the point is that they have different thoughts and intentions and are performing different mental acts based on the fact that they are aware of different propositions. And I gave you quotes from Christians admitting this problem. So what's your response? Because you're claiming that all of the persons due to perichoresis share the same thoughts in the same way. And I'm saying that that's impossible.
You haven't shown how it's possible or impossible.
Yes, I have. I'm showing how it's impossible because of the fact that any statement in which the Trinitarian persons were to know or utter that has the indexical I in it, they cannot be asserting the same thing.
That's the word indestical. Okay.
Indexical. I-N-D. Yeah. Indexical.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
So I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm following what you're saying. You say know it in the same way I asked, and you said they can know the same thing. They have different thoughts and intentions, performing different mental acts. I'm not really concerned with.
Okay, so you want me to try to explain it again?
Try one more time. Okay. I'm trying to understand your position so I can respond to it.
So Scott Williams, who holds a similar view, that wants to say that all the persons share the same actions and thoughts due to perichoresis and all this kind of thing. He says this, and I quote, "The divine persons are aware of different propositions if they use a mental token with the indexical I in it." Okay? In the same way that I just explained Matt, Slick, and Jake. And if that's the case, that's just to admit that the persons do not possess the same mental states when they utilize the indexical I. And this is what William Hasker says, and why he says that you can't have simply one set of divine mental powers or mental acts. They can't share all the same thoughts or knowledge in the same way.
I still don't see the problem because they're not identical states. But yet they're perichoretically related because the perichoresis says in the ontological essence of the Trinity, they are all there and all things known eternally from all of them. They have distinction, but not separation. So I'm still not
they have distinction, but they don't all know the same things in the same way, because there are things that the Father knows that the Son couldn't possibly know, because if he were to know them in the same sense as the Son, he would know something which is false. For the Father to know that he is the Son in the same way that the Son can assert, I am the Son, and know that in that way, it would be false for the Father to know it that way.
I still don't see a problem because it's consistent with the doctrine of the Trinity that the distinction requires that they would have the knowledge or the experience of that knowing a different way than the Father and the Son would with each other. Yet they would all from eternity know that epistemologically that this is all consistent and true within the Godhead. So I don't see any problem. Seriously,
because now the point is to show that you cannot have one mind or one set of divine mental powers or one set of divine mental acts in the Trinity, given the explanation that I just said. So you have to have three minds in the Trinity and not one.
I don't see that. Tell you what I'd like you to do, if you would, because I don't see the problem. I keep coming up with the same response to you, and I'm thinking, no, this doesn't make any sense. That your criticism doesn't make any sense. If you would like to, maybe you can write this out as what a distinct problem is. You send it to me, and I'll write a response and put it up on Carm. Because right now, as you're telling me, what I'm understanding it to be is that you are separating the persons instead of showing their distinction. And the distinction exists within their essence, within the Trinity, and all things shared in the Trinity means that they will be able to understand and comprehend the indexicals from the perspective of themselves as well as the others at the same time, showing distinction, but yet not yet separation in the ontological essence. So I don't see a problem.
Yeah, well, I'll just be restating the problem, but I'd be happy to share it with you. And this is not an argument that I've concocted. And I want to move on to the next argument about the four divine things in just a second. But there's an entire discussion from William Hasker and Scott Williams going back and forth over this problem. So this isn't a Muslim argument or a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying that you were accusing me of such, but I'm just explaining to the audience that this problem is known in the literature, but I'd be happy to share those sources with you. Now, please likewise, do. this idea of or this argument, yeah, of course, because I don't think you really understand the argument. But this other argument,
what you said, I responded at the same time, the same way each time as I repeated it back to you. You didn't seem to say that I got it wrong.
I only have
sorry.
I did say that you have it wrong, but I want to move on to the third argument. So the third argument was
left, gentlemen.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the 2 minutes.
Got 2 minutes left.
So the third argument was the quadrinity argument, in which I was stating that you have the Father being God, the Son being God, the Holy Spirit being God, and the Trinity being God? Do you affirm all four of those statements? And if that is the case, how don't you have four divine things, given the fact that you are making four statements in which you're saying the Trinity is God and each one of the persons are, and they're not identical to each other?
I don't know what you mean by the word God when you use it in that context.
God is the Trinity, correct?
So the Father is a Trinity? That would not be correct.
No, that's not what I'm saying. We already established what you mean by when you say that the Father is God. You are saying that the Father has whatever qualities are necessary in order to be divine. And you say the same thing about the Son and the Holy Spirit. We've already established that. Now, you also make the statement that the Trinity is God. What do you mean when you say that?
The Trinity is the three persons.
In what sense? When you say the Trinity is the three persons, is the Trinity identical to the three persons?
Well, that's an interesting statement, because identity and predication exists within the Trinity, because God as a triune being is both identity and predication. So I think you're misrepresenting it by separating the distinctions what don't exist and giving us a false dichotomy.
Is the Trinity identical to the three persons?
What kind of identical are you talking about? Strict, numeric?
There's only one sense, but I think the time's up.
Now it was getting interesting.
That is 20 minutes on the dot, actually. Great timing. So excellent discussion. I could listen to definitely another 10 rounds of this for sure. I appreciate I appreciate it, gentlemen. We've got a great live chat tonight as well. Very lively with a ton of questions flying in. So Matt, Jake, thank you for making an easy debate to moderate. That's for sure. And we've got closing statements though. So let's hand it to Matt. Matt, you'll give your closing statement first. 5 minutes. And whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer.
All right. Well, let me get my timer going. Sorry. My timer too. I apologize.
No worries.
No worries. Okay.
Take your time. Actually, before you go, let me remind the audience, we got about 10 more minutes then until the audience Q&A. So any final questions, please tag me now. And then I am going to close down the Q&A after the closing statements. Okay, Matt, go ahead.
All right. All right, go. All right. So this has been an interesting discussion. And I think some of the problem that we're having is understanding mutual terms in the context of the terms as they relate in the doctrine of the Trinity. Now, he states that he knows more than the Trinity than I do. That may or may not be the case, but from my understanding, I don't believe so. I offered a syllogism. We went over that. The syllogism is true. I asked him if it was valid, and then I clarified the issue of God being something that he and I both agree is necessary for reality to exist. He has a concept of God. I have a concept of God. And then, because I clarified later after he examined me on this, and I said that the God in this case is a Trinity. If God is necessary, whoever or whatever he is, and God's a Trinity, then logically necessary that the Trinity is necessary for existence and reality. Now, that's a valid argument. Whether it's sound is another topic. We can get into sound and valid arguments. So he didn't rebut that. He just kind of sidestepped it. One of the things I thought was really interesting is, in my opinion, that he was not able to accurately initially articulate the doctrine or the problem of the one and the many. The one and the many thing is issue. What is the ultimate essence of reality? And when I asked him, I remember just being confused. Why are you not telling us what it is? Don't you know what it is? And how do you account for it? He still didn't tell me how he accounts for it, which is something I asked for, to do. How do you account for the problem of the one and the many? And what happened was, instead of accounting for it or giving a rationalization of how it exists, he said, well, what do you mean? What's this? What's that? In other words, he found a way to not answer the question. And that tells me he doesn't understand what the real issue is. And I believe that from the Trinitarian perspective, when we understand the doctrine of the Trinity, where one God is three persons, and the three persons is the one God, or are the one God, we see in this both the issue of identity and predication, that the Trinitarian God is an identity. God is a Trinity, the triune being, but the statement triune being is also predication, because it demonstrates the aspect of attributes as it relates to the divine God. The issue of the one and the many is is the ultimate nature of reality one thing, or is it many things? Is it an essence, or is it particulars? Is it universal or particulars? Abstract universals or concrete particulars? And a lot of people don't understand what that means, but he and I do. And so we're supposed to anyway. And so when we get here, what we're talking about in the necessity of the Trinity, which I don't believe he addressed at all, as I talked about how the Trinity proposes in the one being who is one God in three persons, how the one and the many are simultaneously consistent with the idea of the one and the many, and the existence of God in the Trinitarian sense can then account for the existence of reality in the one and the many, because the one and the many issue is a critical question that has been asked and debated for 2,000 years or more among philosophers throughout the centuries. It is a big problem. And I asked him if he solved it. He said he has. Well, I didn't hear the solution. But I want to know what that solution is. Maybe in his closing statement, he might tell us how the one and the many works. Because as he likes to say in debates, if you don't answer this, then you've lost a debate. Well, if he can't account for, from his perspective, or the non-Trinitarian perspective, it doesn't have to be his, but the non-Trinitarian, because we're arguing the Trinity, if he wants to tell us how a non-Trinitarian position can justify the equal ultimacy of the one and the many, or if he wants to say that the one is primary or ultimate and the particulars are the ultimate, if he wants to get into one of those, then he's going to have a problem in the ubiquitous problem of the one and the many. But if he wants to say that they're equally ultimate, I'm going to ask from where does he justify that? How does he justify it from his perspective when I've already justified it from mine? He has not demonstrated that the justification I've had for the one and the many, resting in the very nature of God, exists. And since God exists as a one and the many, and he is a necessary precondition for reality, then it's consistent to say that God, who is one and many, relates to the one and the many in creation, and we can, as Christians, can answer the problem. Now, as far as the other issues of predication, of linguistic expression, and indexicals and things like that, he's going to come back and say, well, I didn't understand that. Well, I don't understand everything, and sorry, and I don't have every concept understood. But I conclude he doesn't understand some of the concepts that I was giving him as well, because he balked at first on even explaining a couple of them. We can get into that later another time. So I say that God is one particular, we're almost out of time. God is one being who is three persons. This is predication, and it is identity, the necessary precondition for reality. And it's still the case. God is necessary to explain reality, and God's a Trinity. That's not been negated. He's argued it, but he's not proven that it's not true. And so, therefore, the Trinity is necessary for reality. I am out of time.
All right, 5 minutes on the dot. Thank you so much, Matt, for that concluding statement. Jake, we're going to hand it over to you now. You also have 5 minutes. Whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm ready. All right, so I want to thank Matt for participating in the debate again, and Donnie for hosting this debate. Unfortunately, I think it was a decent discussion, but I don't think Matt really actually bore his burden of proof in this debate. He had to demonstrate how only the Trinity can be used as what is necessary to explain reality. I don't think he's done it at all. He presented one argument in which it's very clear that the first premise of the argument is just identical to the conclusion. That's all he's done. And when we're asking for the justification of the first premise, that the Trinity is necessary to explain reality, the only thing he can concoct or come up with is this problem of the one and the many, which he himself, in our discussion just a couple of weeks ago, said that he has struggled to be able to articulate it. And I think that was another example of what happened here today. He struggled to be able to articulate even what the problem is, and why rejecting his solution of the Trinity somehow uniquely solving it entails a contradiction. He hasn't shown that at all. All he's done is just assert it as such, and hasn't demonstrated that by rejecting it, somehow we wind up in a contradiction. And I just want to point out to the Christians in the audience that many, if not most, Christian theologians and philosophers don't even accept this argument. I mean, you can look at people who discuss this online. They think it's a complete joke that this problem of the one and the many is somehow uniquely solved by the Trinity. It's just laughable. So what else can we get to here? Remember that I presented 3 main arguments. Now, I think Matt's already failed the debate because, as I said, and as I predicted, he would either be unable to actually articulate a proper argument, which I don't even think he did, because his first premise is, his conclusion is just a restatement of his first premise. So that doesn't really even get off the ground. And secondly, he didn't give a proper justification for the first premise to demonstrate why rejecting it somehow entails a contradiction, which is his burden of proof. Now, besides that, I offered three main arguments to demonstrate why the Trinity cannot be necessary to explain reality, by showing that the Trinity itself is incoherent and therefore it's unnecessary in some sense. Now, my first argument was known as the logical problem of Trinity, the LPT. I don't think Matt was ever able to show how the Trinity doesn't result in three gods, because he admitted that each one of the persons are divine. If the Father qualifies as something that's divine, the Son is something that's divine, the Holy Spirit is something that's divine, you have three things which are divine, which just follows and equals that there are three gods. Matt wanted to make a big to-do about the fact that you have the doctrine of perichoresis, which means that they're inseparable from each other. But by the mere fact that the persons are inseparable from each other doesn't mean that they cannot count as three gods. Because if that were the case, by the mere fact that the persons are inseparable from each other, we would have to conclude that there's only one person in the Trinity, not three. But because we count by identity, such that we count that there are three persons because of the fact that they're discernible from one another, then we would count that there are three gods by the fact that each one is God and they are discernible from one another. It's going to follow by the same way that you count by identity that there are three persons, that there would be three gods. Now, Matt had some confusion over what an indexical was. He had no idea what an indexical even was. He didn't understand the argument that I was making. My argument was quite simple, that Matt wants to claim that there's only one will or one mind in the Trinity. I'm showing that in the Trinity itself, they cannot perform all the same actions because they do not have the same awareness of propositions. They cannot perform all of the same actions because the Father wills eternally for the Son to exist, and therefore for the Son to perform that same action, it would be him willing himself, which is a contradiction. Now, Matt maybe can do some more research on that. And because I'm so confident that I know more about the Trinity than Matt, because he hasn't done research on this, he hasn't read any of the academic literature on the subject, I'm happy to share those sources with him. And my third and final argument, which I went over with Matt, which I don't think he really was able to respond to, okay, was, one second here. Yeah, so my third and final argument from Matt that I don't think he was able to respond to was the idea of the quadrinity versus the Trinity. And he, again, didn't seem to really understand the argument. The argument was very simple. If you have the Trinity plus the three divine persons, it seems like you have four things which are divine. That's one more thing than Orthodox requires.
Okay, thank you so much there, Jake, for that 5-minute concluding statement. Matt and Jake, thank you so much for an awesome debate here, and also to the live chat for sending in so many excellent questions. This is going to be fun. I will put a time limit here, about 25 minutes, or else we'd probably be here till tomorrow, same time. So that's great, though. A lot of engagement in the chat. I'll give the debaters tonight a quick minute break as I remind the audience that this is another debate marathon week here on Standing for Truth. So last night, we kicked off the week with the great evolution debate, Evolution on Trial. So Dr. Dino and Grayson had a fantastic debate there. Tonight, of course, the much anticipated Jake the Muslim Metaphysician and Matt Slick. These gentlemen certainly did not let us down. This was definitely an epic debate. Tomorrow, we'll be back here. Same time. This one now a debate on Bible translations. Is the King James Bible free from all errors? So we got multiple topics for you this week. This one will be Eddie from the Brute Facts podcast versus Will Kinney. So they've both these debaters have been here in the past before and always make for a fantastic debate. So make sure you're here for that one. And then Friday, we wrap up the week with a debate between Kelly Powers and David Preston. did Peter preach a different gospel than Paul? So this one will focus on dispensational salvation, an important topic, and most certainly a debate that I am looking forward to. So with that, guys, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, but you love debates on all sorts of topics, we've now hosted over 230 debates. And so I believe it's the channel for all the debate addicts out there. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and share around this content, because the truth is important. And we strongly believe in critical thinking here on Standing for Truth. So one way we uphold critical thinking is by hosting so many of these important debates, just like tonight, this debate on, is the Trinity necessary to explain reality? As I wait for Matt to get back here, I will acknowledge the fact that typically there are after shows during these debates. So if there are any after shows to this one, please let me know, and I'll do my best to announce it and let everybody know. In the meantime, Jake, since this is the first time you've been here on the platform, I appreciate your time. For the Q&A section, what we typically do is whoever the question is for, we'll make sure they get the last words, but we allow both debaters to basically make their points and provide some feedback and input. So say the question's for you, we get you to respond. Matt can respond as well, and then we would just give the last word to you. So, okay, with that.
How long do you think we're going to go for?
For the Q&A period?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. I'll put 25 minutes on the clock. And so in light of all the questions, why don't we keep the responses, if it sounds fair to you guys, between 1 and 2 minutes? Let's say if it's a more technical question, you know, we can go to the 2-minute mark to answer. And that way we can get more questions in. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Use the restroom. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. Okay, here we go. Let's get into the questions here. Again, thank you so much to the debaters. So, okay, first question that came in all the way near the beginning. We'll start right at the beginning. And with super chats, I will make sure we get to all the super chats as well. So, okay, first question that has come in is from Sahi Luke. Thank you so much for the question. Question is for Jake. Is something that is triune in and of itself automatically a contradiction? If not, can you demonstrate the A and not A contradiction is saying three persons are one being?
Yeah, so I think the question really is not well defined, because in order for me to evaluate that, I have to understand several key terms in the question. I have to understand what is meant by triune, the three persons and the one being, and how they relate to each other. Now, if you simply mean that I can have one being like a pen, okay, the pen is one being and it can have three parts, well then, yeah, there's no contradiction with that. If you say something else, like I can have one pen and three aspects or three parts of it, each which are identical to the whole, then yes, that is contradictory. And so it just depends on how the person is actually defining the term persons, defining the term being, and explaining the relationship between them. But I don't have the time to really go through all of the different ways that can be done and show how each one would be problematic. But yes, my position is that the Trinity is going to result in either incoherence, in a violation of the classical laws of logic, or it's going to result in an unorthodox or heterodox view.
Okay, appreciate the response there, Jake. Matt, if there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead.
Yeah, one being like a pen has three parts. That would not work within doctrine of the Trinity. It's called partialism. Each of the parts is identical to the whole, but that's not applicable to the Trinity either, because identity and predication are equally ultimate in the Trinity. I noticed he did not address this issue when I raised it, and it was something that it was ignored. So identity and predication are equally ultimate in the Trinity, one God in three persons. And so the A is and not a contradiction of one God in three persons is not a contradiction at all.
Thank you, Matt. Jake, to be fair, question was for you. Get the last word.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't understand that. That's what we're doing. All right. So, yeah, I think I did respond to what Matt had to say, but people can go back and review the tape, obviously, and judge for themselves. I wasn't, to be clear, Matt, I wasn't claiming that Trinitarians believe that the Trinity is something like one pen with three parts. My point was that I can't really answer the question clearly unless I understand how the term persons and being are functioning and what the relationship between the being and the persons are. And this is part of the confusion with somebody like Luke or Matt, is that there isn't just one view of the Trinity. There are multiple views, and therefore I need to be fair, I need to be able to judge them independently.
Okay, thank you for that last word there, Jake. Moving on to the next question, comes in from EA, $10 super chat. Thank you so much. He's sent in a few actually, and also looks like there's going to be an after show on this specific channel. So again, I appreciate the super chat. And the question, this one's for you, Matt. So the questioner is asking, how can God be both identity and predication when in your previous discussion you told Jake to abandon identity? Seems contradictory. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I don't recall what that previous conversation was. I don't recall what the context was about what was said or might have been said, or if it was properly remembered. And so when people ask me these kind of questions, it's always difficult to respond because it's like, I don't know what it was. I don't remember. So I don't know how to respond to that. But can God be both identity and predication? Yes. God is a triune being, is identity, because identity and predication are identical in the nature of God. This is what I've established. This is what I've said. God is a triune being, deals with the issue of identity, what God is. He is a triune being, but the triune being is also predication of the properties and the essence, the primary and secondary substances of God. So it's right there, and I stated it. But as far as the other stuff, another time, I'm sorry, I can't respond. I don't remember the context, don't remember the comment. I just can't respond to that because I just don't know.
Okay, I appreciate it, Matt. Jake, if there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just remind Matt of the context, but maybe he can review the video later. But the same short interaction we had, I don't know exactly when that was now, but where we accuse each other in some sense of being demon possessed. But I was a bit joking, which I said to Matt earlier. But in that conversation, Matt, I have the quote here. You said, "Is the Father equal to God?" Well, God by definition is triune. To say that the Father is triune is the fallacy of equivocation. The is of identity isn't going to work. You should abandon that. So the questioner is saying, when you say that the is of identity isn't going to work, you should abandon that. But then here it seemed like you were saying that you can use both. I think that's why he's confused, but maybe you can clarify or watch the video later. I don't know.
Thank you, Jake. Matt, you can have the last word since the question was for you.
Well, the Father's triune is equivocation. In that context, you should abandon the issue of identity. That's what the context was. It's not in the context of the triune being, who is the one God who is a triune being. It's a different context of what identity is. I would not say to you, Jake, I would not say to you, hey, abandon the whole idea of identity. I wouldn't say that. It doesn't make any sense to say that. But in the context of saying the Father is equal to God and God is triune, therefore the Father is equal to God in the Trinity, is the idea of equivocation. In that context, I would have said, abandon that identity in that sense, because it doesn't work. I think that's the context, if I remember correct. I don't remember. I'm just working with what you said. So.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for that final word. Next one comes in from David. This is a $9 super chat. Thank you so much. With a looks like more of a comment or a statement. I think it's for you, Jake, but I guess we'll work through it together. Perichoresis shows that the three hypostases are inseparable and thus one God. A lump of clay and a statue have different properties, but are not really two things. They are still one in a sense. And so, Jake, if you'd like to respond to that, make any comments, go ahead.
Yeah, this is something important that people need to understand, and which is something Matt sort of hinted at, but he wasn't really clear on, which I was trying to explain. This person is trying to get at the fact that because the three persons are inseparable from one another due to the doctrine of perichoresis, that therefore means that there can be counted as only one God, in the same way that a lump and a statue can be, although they have different properties. And I'm saying, first of all, it's not analogous to the lump and the statue, because God is not made out of material stuff. He's an immaterial being. So the analogy doesn't even get off the ground to start with. Second thing is the idea of the Trinity and each one of them existing at the same time is a synchronic relationship and not a dichronic relationship, in the same way that you have the lump and the statue existing at different times, not existing at the same time with different properties. And as I stated before, if you want to count by the relation of division or separability instead of identity, then if you are consistent, you would count that there's only one person in the same way that you count there's only one God. Because if you count by division and the fact that they're inseparable from one another, that would mean that because the persons are inseparable from one another, you should count them as one person. But you don't do that because you don't want to verbalize that there's actually three gods instead of one.
Thank you, Jake, for that response. Matt, the floor is yours for your response.
Yeah, this gets back to the issue of understanding the relationship of the ontological trinity, perichoresis, economic trinity, ontology, divine simplicity. A slight correction: three hypostases are inseparable due to the perichoresis. That's not correct. It's due to the ontological trinity. Within the ontological trinity exists the economic relationship, and in that we have a cross-bleeding of the perichoretic effect relationship between the members of the Godhead, the person of the Godhead. And so I think here what is a problem, I think what Jake has hinted at a few times, is the problem of this distinction versus separation. We don't separate them. They are distinct, but they're simultaneous and of the same essence. And yes, there is distinction because, as I said in the opening statement, they have difference of function. This is revealed in Scripture. And when we have distinction of function, it shows distinction, yet identity in the same essence, that they are the divine quality. But we have to be careful to not say, well, the triune being is God, or the God is the triune being, and then say, because in reality that is that's predication and identity equally ultimate. And I think what Jake is doing repeatedly is separating them, not realizing the acceptable nature of the equal ultimacy, and then setting one against the other in the issue of separation, not in distinction. I think it's a problem. I'm out of time. I know I got 1 minute.
All right, appreciate it, Matt, Jake. If you guys want to take your full 2 minutes in responses, that's completely fine.
Oh, well, get 2 minutes? I thought it was one.
No, you get. I'm saying 1 to 2 minutes if you want, and anything else. I know. So, I know a lot of.
Yeah, I'm not keeping track of the time when I'm responding. So if I talk too much, just tell me to stop.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We're pretty easygoing in the Q&A period, and a lot of these questions are.
I was just trying to stay within a time limit. That's what I thought. Sorry, my bad.
You both are doing great. No worries at all. So Jake, actually, question was for you. So we'll give you the final word there.
Yeah, I mean, I would just respond again to what Matt said, is that I'm not misunderstanding the difference between a distinction and the fact that the persons are not separable from one another. I do understand that. That's precisely the claim that's being made by David and what I'm responding to. He's saying that we should count them as one God because they're inseparable from one another. But I'm saying if that's the case, then we should count the persons as one person because they're inseparable from one another. However, you count them as three persons because they are distinct from one another, meaning that they have different properties. If that's the case, then you should equally count three gods.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Moving on, next question. This one's for you now, Matt. So the question is from SWE, $5 super chat. Thank you so much for the support and the question. So she's asking, Matt, are you aware that a syllogism with a premise being the same as the conclusion is a fallacy called begging the question?
Yes, I'm aware of it. And just to add on, I clarified several times the issue of the first premise, right? So yeah, I'm aware of it.
Okay, I appreciate it, Matt. Jake, anything you'd like to add?
Other than, yeah, I'm aware of it as well. And I think it's very clear that in the first premise of the argument, it's just identical to the conclusion of the argument. God is necessary to explain reality. God in the first premise is being referred to as a Trinity. If it's something other than that, then Matt seems to be completely abandoning his presuppositional apologetics. And I don't understand how that could be. So God seems to be very clearly referring to the Trinity, in which case the conclusion of the argument is just a restatement of the first premise.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Matt. Yeah, you get the last word.
Yeah, I clarified that God there in the first premise is something that we both would agree with. Remember, I said that we both would agree with. God is necessary. And I even said that in the opening statement. This is a premise we both agree with. That's the clarification of what the premise meant in the context of what it was. Then the second premise further delineates between the worldviews that we would have. So it's not a restatement. And as I said, it wasn't, I didn't understand what he was saying. Okay, now I get it. So that's why I'm telling you that the first statement was a statement that includes both of us, by which we would both agree. The second premise is a distinction that separates the issue, and we would not agree. That's the issue, and which he has to then demonstrate that the second premise is not true, because we both agree the first one is true, which I stated in the opening argument. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that final word there, Matt. Next question comes in from Praise I Am, and Praise I Am has a question for you, Jake. So he's asking, does Jake understand that he's conflating mind and consciousness? Even neurologists have discovered 3 consciousnesses within humans.
Well, that's quite shocking. I'd like to see what the evidence for that is. I'm not aware of neurologists concluding that 3 consciousnesses exist within humans. You may be talking about something like multiple personality disorder or something like that. So I don't know. I'd have to see whatever the evidence for what you're claiming. I'm not really sure. Now, about conflating mind and consciousness, I don't think that I was conflating mind and consciousness in an incorrect manner. So if somebody could point that out, then I'd be happy to take a look and review the tape. But I don't think I was conflating mind and consciousness in a manner that was not appropriate in any context in the debate.
Okay, appreciate it, Jake. Matt, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I don't want to agree with Jake, but I agree with Jake. I'm not sure what is meant by that. I don't understand the issue. So I'm just not sure what to do with it. The idea of mind consciousness conflation, I think that would need to be ferreted out more. So I'm not sure how to respond to it. I'm not sure I understand the issue in relationship to what he was saying.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Is there any quick final word you want to make, Jake, or move on to the next question?
No, I mean, Praise knows me, so he can send me, if he has some type of evidence for 3 consciousnesses in humans or something like that, I'll take a look.
Perfect. Yes, he did just say he'll share it. So, okay, thank you, Praise. Moving on, next question comes in from Guard the Gospel, and this one is for you, Matt. So Guard the Gospel asks, is person human or just descriptive like personages? Do you think the Holy Spirit and Father are human like Jesus was?
To be polite, I don't think the question is worded very well. Is person human? I don't understand what that means, because in the context of the Trinity, person is not human before the creation of the world and everything. So I'm not sure what that means, or just descriptive like personages. And my Mormon knowledge, the word personage triggers a Mormon theological perspective where they have separate entities and separate beings. So I don't know what the person means by personage, because it's not clarified. And do you think the Holy Spirit and the Father should be human like Jesus was? No, they were not. Only the Son was incarnate. So that last part is clear. The Holy Spirit and the Father were not human like Jesus was at all, because only Jesus, the one person, has 2 distinct natures, a human and a divine nature. So it would not apply to the Holy Spirit or the Father, which shows distinction.
Thank you, Matt, for that response. Jake, anything you'd like to add?
No, I'd have to agree with Matt on this one as well. I think it's a very confusing question, so I don't really know how to interpret it.
There we go. We got some agreements from the debaters tonight. Very nice.
2 in a row. That's
2
not
in
good.
a row. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Next one comes in from Texas TY, $5 super chat. Now we got a question for the both of you. So here we go. Do you see the Son's begetting as logical, temporal, or both? And how does it relate to God's ontology sequentially in these respects? I guess the last question was for Matt, and he started. So Jake, if you wanted to start with this one, feel free to do so.
Yeah. So do the sons begetting logical, temporal, or both? If I'm just going to represent how I understand the classical doctrine of eternal generation, it's not meant to be temporal. That's due to the. I mean, it's very clear in the name. It's eternal generation. Now, my understanding is that the church fathers very clearly understood that the generation was a causal dependency relation. And you can find this in people like the Cappadocian church fathers, such as Gregory of Nyssa. In his work on Not Three Gods, he states, and I quote, "The principle of causality distinguishes then the persons of the Holy Trinity. It affirms that the one is uncaused while the other depends on the cause." So the idea is very clear that the Father is unbegotten, he's uncaused, and the Son is eternally caused to exist by the Father. And then obviously, depending on where you turn on the filioque, the Holy Spirit is either from the Father and the Son, or from the Father alone in that context. But yeah, I understand it not in a temporal manner. The ancients and some of the church fathers had the understanding that the eternal generation was a type of eternal causation or dependency relation.
Okay, Jake, thank you so much for the response. Matt, over to you for yours.
Yeah, there's quite a bit here to discuss. The church fathers were the ones that he's quoting Trinitarians, because if he's going to quote something about them that he wants to use against the Trinity, and yet they're Trinitarians, then there's a problem in the consistency of understanding what is being understood in it. And that'd be worth looking at what they quote in the context. Sometimes the Jehovah's Witnesses, he's not a Jehovah's Witness, but sometimes the Jehovah's Witnesses will do this kind of a thing. They'll quote somebody and they, against the Trinity, yet they affirm the Trinity, and because they're not taking the whole context. I don't know what those quotes are, so I can't deal with them right here. Let me explain really quickly. I'm speaking quickly because I'm not trying to dominate all the time here, but there's a difference between temporal priority and logical priority. Here's the illustration. You have a light bulb, electricity enters the light. 5 seconds later, electricity enters the bulb. 5 seconds later, light appears. That's temporal priority because there's a duration of time difference. Logical priority is that there's both simultaneous, but one is logically the cause of the other. Electricity and light are both present simultaneously, but electricity is a logically prior thing, but they're simultaneous. I see the generation issue of the Son and the Father's relationship as being logical priority. And with that, there is no temporal distinction, but it would be the sense, which is beyond our comprehension, the idea that within the intertrinitarian communion, there is an eternal generation of the Son, because in the logical sense, the Father is the one who has begotten him, but it's not that have any temporality like he stated. It's an eternal essence, and this is concomitant with the nature of the eternal being who is God, the Trinity. And so therefore, it would be a logical priority, not a temporal priority, and there's no problem.
Okay, thank you so much there, Matt, for your response. Since that was a question for the both of you, you both got to respond, and we'll move on. So next question comes in. This one is for Jake. This is from Your Way or Yahweh, tested by fire. Question for Jake. How can a part of an eternal nature not be equal to the whole? In other words, isn't a part of infinity equal to infinity?
I don't understand what that means. If you mean in terms of mathematics, then you can have an infinite set in which a part of it is equal to the whole. That's just what infinity would mean. But there are different types of infinities. So some people don't know this, but in mathematics, you can have some infinite sets or infinite quantities that are larger than others. So no, it doesn't follow that they're equal in the sense that I think Terry is understanding it. Now, how can a part of an eternal nature not be equal to the whole? Well, I don't think Matt is even comfortable saying that the persons are parts of the Trinity anyway. So, I mean, it's kind of an irrelevant question. But yeah, if they were to be parts of the whole, then yeah, they couldn't be identical because they would have a property that the whole doesn't have, and that they therefore couldn't be identical. So, but I don't think Matt affirms that view anyway. So,
appreciate it, Jake. Matt, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. and needs to be clarified. These are the kinds of questions, if clarified, could be very instructive, trying to answer. How can a part of the eternal nature not be equal to the whole? We have to, there's an issue here called the fallacy of composition. I'm not saying this is what it is, but it's one of the areas you have to discuss to see what is going on. And words is a part of infinity. Jake's right. There are different kinds of infinities, and you can have half of an infinity be equal to the whole of the infinity, the paradoxes of actual infinites, potential infinites, and things like that. So it's just a lot there to discuss, and it's not something that we could just say, for example, in 1 minute, here's the answer to all this kind of stuff. And the persons are part of the Trinity. They are the Trinity. We don't say they're part of the Trinity. To say a part is to deny that what the Trinity actually is. But yeah, there you go.
All right, appreciate it, Jake. Any final words you want to add there?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen, for the responses to these questions. So next one comes in from Born Again RN. Thank you for the support. Very much appreciated. And also the question, which looks like it is for you, Jake. So he asks, since the Quran affirms the legitimacy of the Bible, since the Bible affirms the necessity of the Trinity, if the Trinity is false, wouldn't the Quran/Islam be false?
Yeah, I don't think the question is particularly on topic, but I'll answer it anyway. I don't think that the Quran affirms the legitimacy of the Bible. There's no mention of the Bible anywhere in the Quran. The claim that the Bible also affirms the necessity of the Trinity, I know that wasn't the subject of tonight's debate, but I mean, I also don't agree with that statement. So I'm not going to get to the conclusion that the Trinity is true, because I don't think that the Quran either affirms the legitimacy of the Bible, nor do I believe that the Bible itself affirms the necessity of the Trinity. And then you can see this very clearly in the Quran itself. It constantly accuses the people of the book of changing the word of God and distorting the meanings of the text, and so on and so forth. And again, there's no mention anywhere of the Bible. If you want to talk about the Injil or the Torah, from a Muslim perspective, it is understood as that which was revealed orally to Moses and Jesus, peace be upon them both. It's not that we believe that there was a Bible that like Jesus was walking around with under his armpit and that was revealed to him. That's not our position. It's an oral revelation, which was then later reduced to writing, and in virtue of it being reduced to writing, it was distorted.
Okay, much appreciated there, Jake. Matt, anything you'd like to add?
Well, it is off topic, but just to answer it a little bit, Surah 3, Surah 6, Surah 10, Surah 18 are probably the kinds of things he's referencing. The questioner about the Torah, the Torah, and the Injil, where Muhammad is actually recommended by Allah to go ask the people of the book, and that is the Bible, the New Testament. And so, yeah, we could, it's just worth a discussion. Why would Allah tell Muhammad to look at the people of the book and consider them if he lacks understanding on something, if the Bible has been corrupted? But this is outside the domain of what our topic is, and is worth a discussion, though.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And Jake, you get the final word. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can find in the Quran in chapter 2, Surah Baqarah. So chapter 2, verses, all throughout the 70s, but you find here in verse number 79, so woe to those who write the book with their own hands and then say, this is from Allah, in order to exchange it for a small price. Woe to them for what they have earned and for what they've written. So the fact of the matter is that the Quran actually accuses the people of the book for writing things down and claiming it's from God when it's not.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Gentlemen, I've got a few more super chat questions. Time has really flown by in this audience Q&A. Are you guys okay if I add 10 more minutes to it? I just want to respect you both of your time.
Yeah, but that's going to be I'm going to have to limit it at that afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. So I just want to let the live chat know, it's been very lively. We've got, again, I've literally got over 50 questions saved. So what I'm going to say to the audience is please don't send in any more super chats, because I do at least like to honor, you know, the donations especially. So if you send in a super chat, I'm not going to be able to get to it. I'm putting 10 more minutes on the timer, and then we got to wrap it up. I really want to respect the time of both Jake and Matt here. So, okay. So here's a question comes in from Samir Farsain. Thank you so much for the super chat and question. Question, I think, is going to be for you, Matt. We'll work through it together. We're judged based on belief in God, not knowledge. Why would God send his son to one lucky group who now knows how are they judged for belief then?
Well, first of all, to say one lucky group is condescending to the issue of the revelation of God. And it's not how it is. God never does anything happenstance. Ephesians 1:11, he works all things after the counsel of his will. It's not luck. That is not part of the Christian domain. God grants that people believe. Philippians 1:29, that belief is in Christ. John 6:29. And so if people don't have that knowledge, then that's just the way it is. God is sovereign, and he has the right to do with his creation as he desires. Romans 9:9-23 talks about this. Why would God send his son to the one group? Well, that's his sovereign right to do that. Who knows? How are they judged for belief then? They're under all, this is Christian theology. All people are obligated under the Adamic covenant to believe and follow the true God. And this is an issue of federal headship, and this is a large topic, and it's worth discussing. It's not germane to our topic at hand, but this is the kind of stuff I get asked regularly in the radio and other places. There's a lot of good answers for it. How are they judged for belief then? Because they're judged by what they're obligated to do, as it says in Acts 17:30. God commands everyone to repent. 1 Peter 1:16, be holy for I am holy. God does not lower his standard for man. He provides a standard for himself in himself, and so they're judged because they openly deny God. Just as, and I mean no disrespect to Jake, I've been praying for his salvation for many days now. I'm not saying I'm superior to him. I'm not mocking him in any way. And I don't have any ill will towards him. But I am asking that God would grant him faith in the true and living God. And that's what is going on. And that's what God's purview is. I'm asking for that and have been asking. Again, Jake, no disrespect meant to you or condescending or superiority or attitude there. Just appealing to my Lord. That's all I'm doing. So.
Okay. Appreciate it, Matt. Jake, anything you'd like to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is from a Muslim. I'm a bit confused why they're saying that we're judged based on belief in God, not knowledge. I would dispute that. I think that the Quran very clearly says that we are to know God, not just believe in him without knowledge, unless maybe he's using those terms in an idiosyncratic way that I'm not aware of. As for God sending his son to one lucky group who now knows how they are judged for belief, I'm not even the question's not really clear to me, so I'm just going to leave that out.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Matt, final word.
No, it's okay. If you guys want to have a Bible study on this, I'd be willing to meet with somebody. We could go through it and I explain the issues.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. It looks like there's somebody in the chat. Al Masihi sent in a $10 super chat. I appreciate it, Al. It does look like it's off topic because it's very similar to the question that Born Again RN asked. So you got a few minutes. If you could just send in a regular question, you don't have to send it in through a super chat. Just ask a very on topic question. The topic, does the Trinity explain reality? And I'll make sure to get that in there. So I just want to respect the debaters here. Okay, so next question then comes in from Pseudonym. Thank you so much for the support and the question. And Pseudonym is asking, in answering the one in the many, why is it not a Trinity? Why not 4 if Jesus was the angel of the Lord, or 5 as a burning bush, or 5 as a cloud, or 6 who visit as one of the strangers? Why 3 exclusively?
Let's see if I can get through this quickly. If God is one person, there are problems in the issue of his identity as it relates to the nature of the personhood and what's called the static mind problem. I don't have time to go into all of that right now. But the true nature of God, if he was one person, could not then be a full expression of his own attributes, particularly in the quality of love. We talk about emergent qualities. I know what Jake would say, and then there's counter responses of that. If God is two persons in the Trinity, then a lot of those problems are solved. But then what arises is that there's if for example, in the issue of love is other-centered, Jesus said in Matthew 12:34. So that would mean that love, which is kind of an impersonal concept or an abstract thing, is then fundamental part and parcel of the nature of God, and that can't be. Then you have an impersonal part of what God is, in essence, and that doesn't work. Trinitarianism solves a problem because of the mediation of the love between the two members, mediated by the third, and this perichoretic relationship goes. And so that at that point becomes the most minimalistic, efficient form of the nature of God's in His identity, and being able to account for the one and the many, and able to account for personhood, not have a static mind problem, be able to experience and express the issue of fellowship and mind as it relates to the nature of love and other qualities. And I went through this really fast, and there's a lot of dots to connect in that, and I've taught on this for many hours, but that would be the basic reason. And beyond three, you have redundancy, and that's not efficient. It's maximally efficient. God's maximally efficient, so therefore three is the maximally efficient, necessary, minimalistic view. A lot said, but that's the basics.
Thank you, Matt, for that.
I know it's fast.
You did good. Jake, if you'd like to add anything, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think his question was trying to get at these appearances of God in the Bible. Why isn't it the case that we would say that there are many persons? I think Christians are just going to say that it's either one or more of the persons. Most Christians think like the appearances of God in the Old Testament is the Son, is Christ. So yeah, they're not going to say that that's multiple persons just because one time appearing as a cloud and another as a burning bush. But in terms of Matt's arguments against Unitarianism, obviously he said a lot there. I can't possibly respond to everything in 1 minute. I was actually expecting that Matt was going to bring up some of those arguments in the debate, and he didn't. I would have been happy to respond to it then or maybe some other time, but time doesn't allow it now. So,
okay, thank you, Jake. And Matt, you get the final word. Go ahead.
Yeah, if people are interested in discussing the issue of the manifestation of God and the appearances of God in the Old Testament as well as the New, we could talk about that. I'm well studied on it, been teaching on it for decades. And one God in three distinct simultaneous persons. I can show you the coherence in the Old Testament. If you're interested, you can check out that. Or if you want, you can come in the after show, and then we can talk about it as well. But it's a common issue. I've written on it extensively, taught on it a lot, and it's worth a good discussion at a slower pace, in more depth.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And final question for the night as we come up to 35 minutes on the audience Q&A. 2.5 hours, gentlemen, has really flown by. It's been an excellent debate, and I thank you both for doing it. So question from Vandalus, $2.99 super chat, short and sweet. Matt Slick, would you ever change your views on the Trinity?
It's not possible for me to change the view on the Trinity because of how I know the Trinity is derived biblically. Since I affirm the authenticity, inspiration, and inerrancy of the Scriptures, and in the Scriptures, the Bible says, and I can give you all the references. You can go to carm.org/Trinity chart, and you can see how the table of the Trinity is arrived at. There's one God, Isaiah 43, 44, 45, and that each of the persons are called God in the Bible. And yet they have distinguishing personhood, since they say I and you and yours and me, etc. This is what the Trinity is and how it's derived at in Scripture. And so because that is what the Scriptures teach, I could not abandon the Trinity unless it could be demonstrated that the Bible itself is completely corrupted. And that's a major problem to assert that, because it would mean that all the or thousands of the manuscripts have all been corrupted, et cetera, and that just is not linguistically, historically, logically possible.
Thank you for that answer there, Matt. Jake, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Not, I mean, it's a direct question for Matt, so it's kind of hard to comment, but I would just say I'd be curious to know from Matt if I'm not saying that he would denounce Trinitarianism, but would he change or is he willing to reconsider some of his positions regarding the Trinity, meaning his understanding of the Trinity in depth? Because there are different models and ways of expressing the Trinity. And I was just wondering if Matt would reconsider any of those. For example, his position on there being one mind and one will, or certain nuances associated with the doctrine.
I'm always willing to study other options and to entertain certain options if they're consistent with scriptural revelation. So I can't say I'm not open. I've always enjoyed challenges, but saying there's different models, then we have to see if the models that are proposed are consistent with what the scriptures say. To say God is one mind and one will, there's two senses in which that can be understood. The ontological perichoretic relationship and the expression of the one, but yet the distinction is there, and yet they're all perichoretically related. And so it appears it could also be spoken of one, because that occurs in the Old Testament, where God says, he speaks I, and then he says, let us make man. And so he speaks in singularity and plurality. This topic is something that's really important. As a matter of fact, in my preparation for this debate, I became even more convinced of the truth of the doctrine of the Trinity. Absolutely more convinced and amazed at the majesty and the work of God as he's represented in creation. And one of the things I love is how Christ himself is the touch of the manifestation of the one and the many, as he is one person in both natures. And through him and his shed blood on the cross, we can have forgiveness of sins, and we don't have to rely on our own works, but we can rely on the work of God. And in him, we are guaranteed salvation and forgiveness. And so it does not depend on my goodness. And this would not be possible if God was not a Trinity. And that's a whole nother topic.
Okay, thank you for those final words there, Matt. We've made it to the end. And again, excellent debate, Matt and Jake. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the audience. That really was a fun audience Q&A. Basically 40 minutes flew by. And what I like to do before wrapping up every debate is give the debaters just some final words and final thoughts. Again, Matt, Jake, thanks for doing this. And thank you for giving all of us your time for this debate. Jake, let's start with you. Again, thank you. And final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, I want to thank Matt for being a part of the debate, and you for hosting again. I just want to say, to sort of match what Matt had to say in his last comment, that I have become more convinced, not only in preparation for the debate, but in light of the debate itself, that the Trinity is not necessary to explain reality. But I do appreciate the discussion, and maybe we could do it again sometime. I don't know. But yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you for those final words and final thoughts. Jake, Matt, thank you as well for doing this. And final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for the debate, Jake, and Don for hosting it. Just to reiterate, I'm now more convinced of who Christ is and what he has done, and the great humility that he exemplified in becoming one of us, and that he died on the cross. And I see this in my realization that God himself is one in many, one God in three persons, and Jesus is one person with two natures. He is a subdivision, so to speak, of the nature of God, who then became one of us and fulfilled the requirement by which we can be saved. One of the things I'd like to discuss sometime with a knowledgeable Muslim is soteriology, the doctrine of salvation. What must be done to guarantee salvation in Islam versus what must be done to guarantee salvation in Christianity? Because I think the premises of who God is and the relationship to people is important. And I know I'm kind of trolling here almost a little bit, or trailing, I should say, but I think it might be worth a discussion sometime.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt, for those final words. And again, to both Jake and Matt, thanks for the excellent debate. To the live chat, thank you so much for tuning in. I know there's at least one after show over on EA Dewa's channel, I believe. And Matt, are you having an after show by any chance, or?
Yes, all you got to do is go to carm.org/calendar, and the link is already there. And when we end here, I'll go spend a few minutes with my wife to make sure she's okay. Then I'll come back in in 3 minutes, hit go, and then people will be able to come in. She'll have to refresh it a few times before it works. And then I'll also put the link for people who want to come into the external on YouTube.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks again. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. God bless all, and Standing for Truth is out.